Hello. I see that the pro-event host has promoted me to one of the panelist speakers.
Good morning, Secretary General. I think that we are more or less all here, and we propose that we start our meeting today, if that's okay, and others can join a little bit later if that's okay.
Or you can, but it's 4 minutes. So who is missing, Ivana?
No, people are getting in slowly as
okay.
participants, so everything is okay. We're going to start right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and dear ladies and gentlemen, very warm welcome to the first donor coordination meeting on youth agenda in the Western Balkans. My name is Ivana Petricevic, and I will give my very best to take you through this morning's session of the meeting as smooth as I can. And before I go any further, I would just like one more time in the name of the Western Balkan Youth Lab project to thank you all for your readiness that we all together join the forces in building the broad coalition for youth in our region. And since I'm fully aware of the busy agendas of all of you and of the many virtual meetings that we all had since this pandemic hit us more than 1 year ago, I will not delay opening of the event any further. And therefore, I have a great pleasure to kindly invite the RCC Secretary General, Ms. Mailinda Bregu, to address us all. Dear Secretary General, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear Ivana, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I know that is expected that I will greet you all this morning, and as usually goes in the meetings, one should go by the diplomatic order. But definitely, I would like to start with you by saying good morning and welcome to all the youth representatives from this region. That's the best way to start a meeting with youth, since we are saying. Since sometimes now I have to say that it's youth time, even that youth time has always been anytime, especially when change was highly expected. So, dear youth representatives, I would like to wish a very warm welcome to you at the first informal donors coordination meeting on youth agenda in the Western Balkans. All of us together this morning in this virtual meeting are glad and happy that today we are all together. Putting our thinking and our work together with you and focusing on you in order to build a broad coalition on youth in the Western Balkans. Dear Mrs. Isaacson, dear representatives of policymakers, representatives of donor community, dear friends and colleagues of RICO. It is a great pleasure to open this meeting today, and I do hope sincerely that we will be starting by now to deploy a new approach, one in which youth policymakers and donors all together will have the chance to sit, discuss in a constructive way the youth priorities, youth needs, and ways in which these needs can be met. I know this is not the very first time and let's say the first attempt to bring all these parts of the chain all together, but I do hope that it's going to work for its best. The final aim of this approach is to contribute to improving the lives of youth throughout the Western Balkans. It is definitely, and it should be, the priority of every and single government in the region. But we are trying to do to coordinate, to help, and to do our best in order to make this possible. And by saying this, let me thank the European Commission for recognizing clearly the importance of youth and for supporting the establishment of youth labs as agreed in the Sofia summit in 2018. So let me Also, thank to all the donor organizations with whom we consulted over the last couple of months as part of the mapping in order to get a comprehensive overview of donor support to youth. And for those numerous meetings we organized with donors in order to present the concept that we are starting to implement jointly today. My thanks goes to Raiko, our strong and dedicated partner, and finally to the most important ones, to the youth and the policymakers. In our societies, and you might know the figures better than myself, youth makes for 20.20% or more than 20% of our entire population. You might hear it every day that youth is present, youth is future, but I do believe that whenever youth has a chance to show itself, they can decide better which verb and which tense can work for them. We are trying to give a voice not only to the young, through the youth lab, not only to the young people in the region, but we would like as well to see among the youngsters that are participating in this project as well, those who will be capable to contribute to the region from now and in the years to come. With this in mind, at the RCC, we are implementing the activities which directly impact the youth in the region. Some of those are related to our work on having a proper one on the youth unemployment in the region, which could contribute to the introduction of youth guarantee in the region. Organization of those innovative competitions such as Balcaton and Futurismo, like those ideas that do introduce some novelties, like the startups on innovation and technology. Our dedicated work on the recognition of academic qualifications and professional ones. The travel with ID cards, and this is going to help mostly the young community and business as well in the region. The regional roaming agreement that is entering fully into force with zero tariffs starting from the 1st of July this year. Our internship program for young people engaged in the RCC. Our testimonial campaigns. Recently, we launched a network on girls and women in STEM and others that will have a direct impact on youth. As you are aware, within the Youth Lab project, we are trying to make sure that policymakers work with youth and for youth, jointly identifying main problems and possible solutions. And it did not come by surprise that our first Youth Lab launched in December last year is dedicated to youth unemployment, problem that knows no border and has a strong impact on our young people. While identification of the issue and possible solutions are completed, I believe we'll agree that youth and policymakers can't implement proposed solutions on their own. And it is therefore important that all the relevant regional and international organizations active in the region support the young community in this path. With that in mind, we are happy to learn during our mapping exercise that youth is getting more prominent attention, both at the economy level and its donor support programs. Now, championing the regional cooperation and exchange for years, we in the RCC believe that there is always more that we can learn from each other. And in these times, I can say, especially, we can learn from each other in abhorring the animosities and the polarization that has altered the political discourse, the public civility in our times. I would very much appreciate, and we look forward to have through this Youth Lab a model of cooperation, communication, and definitely a new mindset of trying to accept the other and not to identify the problems or try to point out the wrongness or the rightness in any of us. So, as you are aware as well, the main aim of this broad coalition for youth is to bring together all the relevant stakeholders in the field of youth, such as governments, representatives, national youth councils, youth umbrella organizations, donor community, relevant regional organizations. And for this reason, we are grateful to all of you who supported these ideas through our consultations. We hope that as of today, we'll start even closer cooperation for the benefit of youth. Our regular meetings should enable the exchange and plans that is additionally supported by an online platform. This platform will provide to all of us a real-time overview on ongoing support for youth, so as to foster exchange of ideas and joining forces in the areas of mutual interest for the benefit of youth. Therefore, we committed ourselves that by the next donors coordination meeting, planned to take place by the end of this year in December, we will have this platform established and functional. But here, definitely, we will need your strong support. Now, the rationale why it's important and why we trust that it's quite important in concrete terms to have this set and let's say this trend of youth cooperation in the region, it's not coming only by our own personal thinking, but even it's quite supported by real facts from the region. As you know, every year we do our Balkan Barometer survey. And as of this year edition, we decided to focus certain questions specifically on the youth issues. While this Balkan Barometer 2021 is not yet published, I'd like to share with you some insights which I believe clearly call for further actions. 84.7% of youth aged 18-24 who participated and replied as part of the sample of this Balkan Barometer stated that regional initiatives on youth cooperation make them feel more optimistic about the future. 93.1% of this age group, and if we say 93%, it's almost the whole population, the whole sample that was asked. They believe that public administration should strengthen mechanisms for consulting and involving young people in decision making. 88.4% of youth same age believe that regional cooperation will be improved if opinions of young people are taken into account in the policy making and law-making processes. In parallel, our mapping is showing that actions of different donors are mainly focused on employment, education, youth participation, all of them being of great importance. Still, we have to bear in mind that areas such as rural youth, youth cooperation beyond Western Balkan 6, digital literacy, youth in diaspora should not left behind. So this is the main aim of the broad coalition for youth and the main idea behind setting up these informal donors coordination mechanism. I hope that we will all together be successful in mainstreaming this cooperation, and that today and tomorrow will be productive days opening new avenues for support to youth in the years to come. So that from my side, I will stop here by giving the word to Mrs. Isaacson, Head of Sector at DG NEAR, thanking as well her for the support that the EU is providing to the youth agenda in the Western Balkan region. And by giving the floor to you, Mrs. Isaacson, I have to as well wish to all of you 2 very successful meetings.
Thank you very much for that excellent introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, youth representatives and distinguished representatives that we have of policymakers and international partners, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to apologize for the absence of Mr. Schröder, who I know would have been very pleased to welcome you to this meeting, but unfortunately had to cancel last minute. We are really happy to see this great participation today, because improving the situation for young people it is something that's a key priority, and to make progress we really need to put our efforts together and collaborate and make the best of common resources, and also think together. I thought you said it very well, that there's always something more to learn, and we sometimes have this feeling that everything has been said, but that's really not the case. It is the way that the more we exchange, there's always new ideas coming up. So that's why this meeting is so important for us. So you have heard this meeting is arranged in the context of the EU-funded Western Balkans Regional Youth Lab project, which we think is a great step forward towards giving young people a voice and to mobilize youth to engage more in policy making. And I think it has a very innovative approach, that we have moved away from these isolated events, and instead we're looking for a strategic and well-managed process to engage young women and men in policy making. So a few words on the regional context for us. Well, we all know that young people face many challenges in the world, and in the Western Balkans. There are many pressing and wide-ranging issues such as high unemployment, pollution, education, but very much the employment agenda. And then, of course, on top of that, this year we have had the COVID-19 pandemic, which has affected our lives in an unprecedented way. And young people, I think, have suffered specifically from this. You've suffered from over proportionally from business closures, for example, as young people are typically overrepresented in the sectors that are most affected by the measures to contain the pandemic. It could be restaurants, hotels, passenger transport, etc. And then, of course, this general fear of causing harm to loved ones, etc. So from our side, since the start of the outbreak, we have worked very hard in European Union and to mobilize support Balkans partners in fighting the pandemic. We've started emergency medical assistance and support to vulnerable groups, and then we've moved on to free up and redirect resources towards the socioeconomic recovery, which I think is the topic now of interest for also this meeting. In total, we mobilized more than 3 billion euro for this purpose. And I think the pandemic has made it very clear that the economic recovery is going to be the biggest challenge facing. And we have come forth with this economic and investment plan, which supports a green and digital transition and fosters regional economic cooperation, integration and convergence with the European Union. And the younger generations are really a major focus in all that work, and youth remains a focus and at the center of the structural reforms in the Western Balkans. We have to work hard to create an environment where young people see their future in the region. So let me say a few words on how the EU seeks to support the region in responding to the challenges that the young people are facing. Firstly, we have the skills agenda. The lack of job opportunities, together with the skills mismatch, the gap between labor market demands and the skills that young people can offer, these are really obstacles to the participation of young people in the labor market. So therefore, we're supporting the region to invest in education and skills, and this is a priority for us. Specifically, we have to work on the transitions from school to work. This requires particular attention and the support of all relevant stakeholders, policymakers, and education and training institutions, social and employment services. We have on our side increased the funding for Erasmus Plus for the Western Balkans, opening also a stronger focus on vocational training stand and also virtual mobilities. We are working to help to improve the quality of education systems in the region, to specific financial support and capacity building of educational institutions. Of course, this is only one contribution, but all these programs already contribute to improving the skill sets of young women and men. we think that the recent economic and investment plan, with its focus on the digital and the green agenda, is also something of real relevance for young people. These issues are here to stay, and I think these areas are also areas which can really bring meaningful opportunities for young generations in the regions if properly embraced by the policy level. We are also contributing to the job creation by facilitating access to finance for young entrepreneurs and for SMEs that create jobs for young people. And another key area of work has been the youth guarantee, where, as you know, contrary that youth guarantee may bring the thoughts to some kind of financial instrument, a financial guarantee, but what it is, the youth guarantee, it's modeled on a successful initiative that already exists within the EU and which aims to ensure that all young people do receive a good quality offer of employment, continued education, apprenticeship or traineeship after education. And these programs are more necessary now than ever, and need to pay attention to help young people to choose the right trainings and guide them to future career areas. So we stand ready to work on this area, and currently we're looking into the best ways that we can provide support for this initiative. And then finally, regional cooperation. This, as was mentioned by the introductory remarks, this is a key area where we have to move forward. It's so important to have a common regional market, and which will not only bring the Western Balkans closer to the EU, but this is something that will really have a transformative potential for the region and offering new opportunities for youth. And in the area of regional cooperation, we extensively support the efforts of the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, which we don't need to introduce any further here. We have also introduced a specific focus on youth in one of our ongoing programs that work with local democracy. This is called Reload and is implemented with UNDP. And this is intended to support youth participation at the local level through decision-making, local solidarity initiatives for community development, and so on. And the idea with this is to not only, well, to try and reach out also to youth that may not necessarily participate in these policy debates at the central level, but to really try and reach out to also the groups of youth that may be a bit more marginalized. So sorry if that was a bit of a long list. We're quite proud from our side of the work that we have done to support the youth, and we're happy to talk about it, of course. But really, I'm looking very much forward to the meeting today and tomorrow to hear the mapping that's been done, to hear the views of all the stakeholders that are in the meeting, and also to try and see what new ideas will come out that we can work on together, because there is always more to do, and there is always things that we can learn from each other. So thank you very much for the time and for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both our Secretary General and to Ms. Isaacson for these very clear and encouraging messages that we received, and for being with us today. As you all know, the meeting today, and moreover the entire concept on the creation of the Broad Coalition for Youth, that is actually informal donor coordination mechanism on youth agenda in the Western Balkans, stemming from the mapping exercise that the Western Balkan Youth Lab project did over the last months of year 2020. And the entire exercise and the entire mapping was actually based around two main segments. The first one that has been dedicated to identification of the legal, strategic, and institutional framework for the youth agenda in each of the Western Balkan 6 economies. And the second one that has been focused on identification of the donor interventions which are supporting youth and youth agendas throughout the Western Balkans. So in order to set the scene and to provide a base for more in-depth discussions that we're going to have later today and during the day tomorrow, I would like to invite Ms. Gloriana Bino, who is the leader of the team who has been working on the mapping exercise over the course at the end of year 2020, and whom most of you probably met during this exercise, to provide us all with an overview of the youth policies in the Western Balkan states. Floriana, thanks a lot, and I'm giving the floor to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ivana. Good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Bregu, Madam Isaacson, dear representatives of the governments of the Western Balkan 6, representative from RICO and all the RCC team and donor and youth community for being here today. I'm really pleased to see this mechanism as a broad coalition for youth come to life. And I would like to present briefly today with you some of our key findings regarding the mapping that we conducted on youth policy in the Western Balkan 6. I'm here, as Ivana said, in the capacity of research team leader, but this has been a joint effort, and I'm grateful for all the cooperation that we have had for the realization of this exercise, and I hope that you will all find our reports useful. We conducted youth policy mapping per each of the Western Balkan 6 economy, and then we also compiled a comparative report at a regional level, identifying good practices, common trends, but also gaps, and providing recommendations. I will focus on youth policies, funding mechanisms, youth participation, and some key recommendations that we provide for policymakers and for youth and civil society. And then, as you know, for the agenda during the day today, you will hear more about the donor mapping and recommendations for overlapping and spaces for synergies in the youth agenda. We also conducted a snapshot of the impact of COVID-19 on youth, as was also mentioned by the previous speakers, and provided recommendations on mitigating the impact as well. We used the collaborative approach. The RCC set the structure and the scope of the research, and then the team of the researchers, we had one research for each of the economy, worked on the field work, but also on the analysis and conducting the mapping, and the Open Society Foundation for Albania provided quality assurance support to finalize the reports. In terms of the methodology for drafting and updating the reports per each of the economy, and then for the comparative report as well, we based this on desk research and empirical research as well. And this was conducted during October and December 2020, and then finalized in January 2021. We use secondary data, available statisticals from official statistics institutes in the economies, but also Eurostat data were available. And then we conducted in-depth interviews with stakeholders in each of the economy, as you can see in the screen, with a total number of 77 in-depth interviews regarding youth policy, but particularly donor intervention and programs as well in youth and youth-related areas. The first chapter, or
Liliana, I apologize, but we cannot see the slides moving, so...
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
I will try to share the screen again.
Okay. Now it's okay. Now we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, good. As I was saying, the first chapter, or the main pillar, refers to data on youth in terms of population, education, employment, and migration. We find that a key challenge in this regard is the limited availability of youth-specific disaggregated data, and a lack of consistency with the age category that is used in youth policy, but also in data collection. And this affects youth research, youth policy, evidence-based youth policy, but also the possibility to have data comparability at regional or at a EU level. Then we look into the youth policy framework by looking into constitutions, youth laws available in the Western Balkan 6, national strategies, action plans, and institutions dealing with youth, and other sectors that impact youth agenda, such as education, employment, social inclusion, health as well. In terms of the legal framework, constitutional provisions on youth differ across the Western Balkan 6. However, on a positive note, all the Western Balkan 6 economies have approved laws on youth now, although not all of them have a national strategy in place. And the action plan development and implementation differs in terms of its effectiveness and success. Youth as a policy sector is usually harbored within the education, sports, and culture at a ministerial level. In the case of North Macedonia, we have an agency for sports and youth. Across the Western Balkan 6 economies, also local government units are responsible to different degree on pushing forward the agenda on youth and financing and supporting youth actions as well. And as I mentioned, line ministries interrelated are the ones in charge of employment, education, health, social protection, but also justice and internal affairs. The mapping finds limited interinstitutional coordination and cross-sectorial harmonization as a key challenge, actually, and as a common feature of the youth policy framework in all of the economies of the Western Balkan. But the Western Balkan economies have made considerable progress in terms of establishing and consolidating the policy and the legal framework with laws, strategies, and action plans in place. However, there are some challenges that still persist and were mentioned as well by Mrs. Bregu and Mrs. Isaacson before, related to the COVID-19 crisis and impact, but also the wider political issues that affect the youth agenda, and sometimes also limited willingness to make youth as a key priority. And as I mentioned, the interinstitutional and cross-sectorial policy. And a fully functional youth system that ensures effective youth empowerment, engagement, and participation in decision-making is still yet to be developed, even though the mapping finds increased interest in youth agenda from all actors, including government and donors alike. Then we look into the funding framework, the funds available for youth policy, but also funding for youth organizations or civil society working with youth, and other key programs that support youth, such as, for example, programs on education or on startup development, entrepreneurship, or employment or skills development. And we find that, of course, there are a variety of sources and mechanisms to support youth and youth policy development in the Western Balkan 6, from state budget, both at central and local level, but and the main source of support, of course, is provided by development partners and international organizations and donors. But the stakeholders we interviewed and the data that we analyzed all point to a lack of sufficient budget allocation for youth and the issue of transparency of funding as two main concerns regarding the funding framework. Some financial overlapping is noticed, is frequent, due also to the issue of limited coordination that I mentioned within the policy framework. Also, monitoring and evaluation of youth policy implementation is challenging and needs to be consolidated further. The other pillar we looked into was the youth participation in policymaking, focusing particularly on youth councils and umbrella organizations and associations established and functioning in each of the Western Balkan 6 economies, and their role in the participation of youth, both at the central and at the local level. But also we looked into some good practices and gaps in terms of evidence-based youth policy and how these mechanisms, these youth councils or youth umbrella organization function, and what are their achievements and their challenges and constraints as well. And of course, there is in place a legal and policy frameworks that allows for the youth engagement and participation in decision-making. However, a functioning youth structured dialogue is happening only in Serbia at the moment, and we recommend that such a mechanism should be developed and consolidated further in all of the Western Balkan 6 economies, as there is still room for improving this effective youth participation and genuine youth participation in decision-making processes. Some weaknesses also relate to the capacity of the institutions responsible for ensuring such participation, their status, their functionality, their funding, but also their ability to communicate, to cooperate with other stakeholders, so their outreach and their impact within the youth community. In terms of the evidence-based youth policy making, some improvements are noticed, particularly when we, in terms of the consultation process and use of evidence for the development and approval of laws and national strategies on youth. But there are some challenges that remain, and this is not particularly only for the youth agenda, youth policy making, because it refers to the general challenges of the knowledge systems in the Western Balkan 6 and the use of evidence and research in policy making. On the demand side, there is still a limited use of evidence and research take up by policymakers, although improvements are still noticed. And on the supply side, still youth representatives stress out that they need further support to consolidate and to further strengthen their capacity to conduct evidence-based research that offers quality, reliability of data, and that enables them then to engage in policy dialogue. In terms of the donor mapping, this will be presented later on in the day by Mr. Dobrushi. The researchers have conducted thorough mapping of donor interventions, as thorough as possible with the data available and based on the in-depth interviews that we conducted. We looked into programs, projects, funds, but also results and potential impact and availability of funds. And we have identified priority areas where there is a lot of focus, where there is overlap, and where there is possibility to build synergies for the future. So some coordination already, of course, exists, particularly in areas that have strong focus for a long time, such as employment, skills development, and vocational education and training. And some good practices can also be observed in terms of consultation of programming on the side of the donors, including youth and civil society organizations, and sub-granting as a means to support smaller organizations and to contribute to their financial sustainability. Although COVID-19 has, well, as already mentioned, and as we all are aware, strongly impacted youth and youth agenda in the region, we find only some limited measures to support youth, particularly in terms of education, and in North Macedonia also in terms of supporting youth farmers and youth small businesses. And we suggest that further studies and research is needed to do a full examination of the measures that have been in place by Western Balkan 6 economies and related stakeholders to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on youth and youth-related areas. Finally, I'll move into the recommendations, and as I mentioned before, I will provide briefly some recommendations for policymakers and then for youth organizations, because we will cover the recommendations for donor community later on in the day. We focus on these key, let's say, areas for providing recommendations for policymakers, starting from the availability of data and then concluding with regional cooperation and donor coordination. We believe that it is essential to step up efforts to enhance the administrative capacities of local institutions, but also at the central level for data collection, specific data on youth, their publication in a format that is available, open access, reliable, and offers transparency. It is necessary to further improve current efforts for evidence-based youth policy making through use of evidence research and data, but also through structured and continuous dialogue with various stakeholders from the youth, civil society, but also academia and other sectors. So youth structured dialogue should be established and reinforced across the Western Balkan 6 economies, also in light of the EU integration process as well. building resource centers that support youth as a joint effort of various donors, but also local partners, institutions responsible for youth and youth organization as well is another recommendations. Western Balkan 6 governments should also commit to complete or amend or improve the policy and legal framework as necessary, but also particularly considering the impact of COVID or post-COVID-19 induced reality, the impact of digitalization, also of the green agenda that was mentioned here. So some updates are necessary to be done, and following European best practices and standards. In terms of funding, we recommend to focus on the youth guarantee mechanism that Mrs. Bregu also mentioned before. We find that this model is still nascent, at least in some of the economies, but it needs to be consolidated further. And of course, the Western Balkan 6 governments should continue their commitment and their support for the regional initiatives that support youth, such as, of course, funding RICO, but also contributing with funding to the Erasmus Plus program or other initiatives at the regional level, and focus on priority areas regarding mobility of youth, but also tackling brain drain and the provision of space for participation of genuine participation of youth in policy making. And then in terms of youth organization or civil society working with youth, the mapping finds that it is very important to build sustainable and trusting relations with diverse groups of youth and to reach as many groups as possible and not the usual suspects, how to say, so to reach marginalized youth or youth who live in rural areas or who live in dire economic situation. Networking, cooperation, partnership building is important, as well as diversifying sources of funding and finances, mobilization of finances for youth organizations so as to break, in a sense, the donor dependency cycle. Also, youth organizations and other CSOs working with youth should be very proactive in communicating with the relevant stakeholders and pushing forward a clear mission and a clear agenda for youth, not only at the level of each economy, but also at the regional level and beyond. We also recommend that it is very important to push forward the cooperation of youth and youth mechanisms and structures and organizations with other peers within the Western Balkans, but also across the region. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'm here to clarify anything else further. Thank you, Ivana.
Thank you very much to you, Bleriana, for the presentation today. And also one more time, just a big thanks to the entire team of the experts who worked on the mapping, and in the same time to all of those with whom you organized the interviews, representatives of donors and other stakeholders that were in communication with you towards the end of 2020. It was really, I think, very important and very informative to have the overview of what the situation is in general terms. And as we already mentioned here a couple of times today, I think that we will all agree that talking or discussing youth issues in the Western Balkan region is almost impossible without our dear friends, dear colleagues, and dear partners from RICO. And that's why we in the Western Balkan Youth Lab project are making sure that we are continuously in communication and cooperation with RICO. And in this same spirit, we are very happy that today we have with us Jan Zlatan Kulenovic, Director of Programs in RICO, who will be taking over from here and who will be moderating our next panel, where we're gonna build upon from what we learned from Bleriana just right now by listening to youth and policymakers about the current situation and the current need in each of the Western Balkan 6 economies. Jan, Thanks again for being with us and for pairing with us one more time. And huge thanks to, as what I already said, to Raiko for the great cooperation that we are having. I'm taking it over to you for our next panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for nice words. Greetings from Tirana and Regional Youth Cooperation Office. I'm very happy to see this initiative, and I think it's very relevant for everyone who is here. I think the question of synergy and coordination and putting, let's say, jointly efforts in supporting young people in the Western Balkans is one of the big conditions, let's say, for efficient response. As Ivana mentioned, we will have this panel that will give us a little bit more, let's say, details and key priorities coming from each of 6 economies. And from the side of Regional Youth Cooperation Office, we learned few things that are very relevant for this discussion. Number one, if you look back, and I still have, let's say, for the last 2 decades, memory how youth issues have been on agenda or not on agenda. I think one very important thing for this discussion and even panel is that it's very, very important to have a political will and political recognition of certain topic. And during the Berlin process, what happened 4.5 years ago is that 6 governments decided to institutionalize, let's say, regional youth cooperation with RICO. And I think establishing of Regional Youth Cooperation Office was one sign that is not about donors, it's not about others, it's about us, how to create the framework and how to, let's say, put political emphasis that this is relevant topic, not for the moment, not because of the trends, but as a let's say, long-term commitment. And I think this is also what we learned in RICO, that is very important to have on political agenda, something that is not only project, but also institution being there and working on certain aspect of the youth, in this case, peace building, of course, and regional youth cooperation. But in general, I think being on agenda and having institutionalized also approach, what we also heard as one of the recommendations just minutes ago, is very relevant. The second thing, I think, what is very important, and it was emphasized also by Open Society document, is this co-management. Talking about youth without youth doesn't have sense. What we learned also, second thing, is that in the governing board of RICO, which is maybe non-usual practice, we have 6 ministers, policymakers, and 6 young people, youth representatives. And I think even during this panel that comes in 1 minute, we will have that kind of connection and equal, let's say, representation from both government side, but also youth and in youth umbrellas. And the third thing, what I think is the highlight of this session, is our personal experience and practice is relevant, of course, to even mainstream programs and even provide certain strategic points, both on the level of governments, donors, even civil society. But what is the essence is, I think, evidence-based formulation, where it's very difficult to say what exactly is, let's say, the status of youth, because youth, as we know, is a cross-cutting issue, and they are everywhere. We have, I think we saw in the presentation, 21% of the population is in the youth, let's say, are young people in the population. So they are interested and affected by every single topic. But still, in the end of the day, and we will hear now at this panel, there are certain, let's say, also concrete measurable data. And I can even announce now that in May, we will invite you also on 2 events. One will be a promotion with RICO and UN Peace Building Fund on the study on youth perceptions in peace and stability and security, that will basically talk about youth as a factor of stability or non-stability, and also I think some of these more evidence-based priorities. But to stop now from let's say our lessons learned in these three areas, I think the focus should be on our speakers today, and we will have 6 persons, as I said already. You have it in agenda, but what is interesting about them is that they are coming from the governments and from youth networks, and they will tell us in, let's say, 5 minutes, which is always not enough time, what are the highlights? What are the highlights on the needs of young people in respective economies, and what we can see more on, let's say, economy in the World Bank, in the Western Balkan 6 as a priorities. This will help us, I think, to match with donors' expectations and plans afterwards, and then tomorrow even more important about our, let's say, joint cooperation and possibilities for interventions and finding the common ground. So not to take more time, we will have here 6 speakers, and the first one, which, if you allow me, I can introduce, is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Education, Sports and Youth in Albania, and with us is Oltion Rumbulaku. So please, your time for highlighting the most important priorities, please share with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Of course, as a region, but of course, even as the Albania, we think that the unemployment and the migration probably are the 2 main topics that we should stress more in the future for the youth. Of course, we know about the not in education, not in employment and training, let's say, indicators. Let's add to this indicator even for let's say, migration, not in migration, if we can say, or not in temporary migration. And if we break down the figures, at least we in Albania, we have 2 main problems, which I will focus more in my speech. The first problem, of course, is let's say the employment of the youth and or the orientation of the youth in the labor market, and the other one could be let's say the rural, let's say, moving the rural youth forward, or even putting the youth more in the economy, the rural youth, I mean, in the economy and in, let's say, a quality life. Of course, we can have a better employment for all, but we know that young people are suffering now from high youth unemployment, poor working conditions, and of course, probably even discrimination in the labor market and in the workplace. The lack of information for the suitable skills for the future are preventing the youth to be fully integrated soon in the labor market. And many youngsters are, we can say, are losing many years in their life by having not the proper orientation. There is, of course, as Brianna mentioned, there is a huge focus on that in our economies, but that is just a fraction of an overall education intervention, or let's say numbers. So the biggest part of the youngsters, of course, tend to go to the higher education, tend to search for skills that they think that could bring a better life for them and better life for the society. Of course, we should strive to have those youngers prepared for the society, prepared for their life, albeit they live in the region or they will migrate. So there is a need to ensure that these youngsters develop the necessary skills and practical experience to smoothen the transition from education to the labor market. We are trying on our side as a ministry to get some more information, some more about the relations between, let's say, the higher education and the needs for the private sector. Our let's say data suggests that there are very weak links, especially in some study programs, which could have a better connection. I'll give you just one example. So we have a study program on textile engineering, and in the whole program of 2012 with 60 students, only one of them now is working on the textile sector. 59 others, of course, are working in different areas, are working in public administration, are working in call centers, are working in promotion, are working in the police force, but not in the textile engineering. So the need to let's say to foresight the demands and to foresight the offer of the whole range of those who offer or prepare the skills, and the whole range of the actors that need these skills in the labor market is very important. And this need for foresight, this need for let's say the professions planning, of course, should orient even the financing of the education and all the programs and sectors that should concentrate the country itself, but even the economy itself. So, of course, the other thing that I mentioned to you is that the rural youth, at least in Albania, tends more to migrate and to stay in a continuous temporary migration lifestyle. I don't know if it happens even in the other countries, but a big number of youth in the rural area stays 3 months in migration, and then 3 months within the country, and then still in migration, and then they return in the country. So they mostly they have the status of returnee in our countries, so returning from migration, but they stay unemployed in our country, and of course employed in another country. And these youngsters, of course, let's say, bring higher the ratio of unemployment, but of course lack their potential, their contribution to the economy. Of course, we should create more conditions for these youngsters to fulfill their potential in their country, in their rural areas. We had, let's say, we had the earthquake of 1.5 years ago, and it was, let's say, a lack in another way for having the possibility to build again the infrastructure, education infrastructure in these areas in the central Albania. And of course, this contribution to a better education for those youngsters in the future could be used, in fact, for let's say more to bring more services to them and to link more their potential to the economy. Of course, by ensuring the protection of rural transitions, the potential of agrotourism and rural development. But there is this need to use those youngsters who got their experience abroad, but to use that experience in their home country. So those are my two main concerns. Of course, of youth is very cross-sectional. We can talk for hours, but these two are very important topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From let's say challenge of the linking education and labor market and youth employment as one of the highlights from Albania, we will move immediately to Bosnia-Herzegovina. With us is also Nedim Alibegovic, Secretary General of the Youth Council of Federation of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And we will ask the same question. What are the key needs and highlights of the youth needs in Bosnia-Herzegovina?
Thank you, Jan, and greetings from Sarajevo. Thank you for this opportunity also, because it's not very often that the youth structures maybe and young people that work with youth and youth issues have the opportunity to present our point of view. I will, on one side, try to present something that is by the attitudes and opinions of young people, the problems that are faced in Bosnia and Herzegovina and that young people face in general. And of course, I will then focus maybe on our nature of work and on something that the Youth Council is working on continuously and what we see as a long-term problems in general. So something that you have mentioned earlier, for sure, for youngsters in Bosnia and Herzegovina is also a problem. And that's for sure employment, fear of corruption, educational system, and the fear that education that they are going through will get them the employment opportunities on one side and give them the knowledge they need. And something that is often said by young people in Bosnia is that they do not have belief in the political system, and that the policy in general, politics, can actually make change and improve their lives. That is presumably connected with something that I will talk a little bit later on. Something which is also a big problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina is that we do not work much or do not focus much with our policies for youth in rural areas, because youth migration as well as the emigration that towards Europe and the region, something that we see in Bosnia and Herzegovina is also the migration that are happening inside of the country toward the regional centers, which is in the past years more often than usual. We do not work also enough with youth from marginalized groups, and when we work on these topics, it is usually not intersectoral, and it is usually not also following the partnership inside the civil society and the partnership outside the civil society toward the government representatives. Ms. Blarena was talking about something that is also for us very important and what we use in our work, and that is the youth law, which is not only in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we have two other youth laws inside the country. Of course, that is important, and for us, it makes our work more easier and something that we can advocate for. But the problem that is persistent in these past years is that the youth law is not implemented in a way that it is said, and in the end, it doesn't affect the quality of the life of young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina because of the poor youth law implementation in practice. In that sense, I think for donors and for the partnership among youth structures and government representatives, I think it is important to work more on the youth law implementation. What has to be done, especially on the local level, where we have municipalities which do not implement youth law, not only because they do not want to, but sometimes they do not know how, or the best ways and practices on how to put it in motion. So I think that the work has to be done here especially. You have talked much about the political will and about how much are young people actually political question, or is there a consensus regarding that? Yes, in the past maybe years or in the recent terms, young people have had more place maybe in the media and in the political discussions. At one point, having in mind that the youth laws exist from 2010, it is a long way and long time has been passed till the young people have really became a political question. And maybe that is also the reason why there is not enough implementation, or why youth structures don't feel like the change that was needed was ensured. But on the other sense, something that we see as a very important question, if we have now or in the future, when we have a strong political will or strong political actions toward the ensuring of the youth policy and better youth policies. On the other hand, something inside the Youth Council on what we are working on is that we have to ensure that young people will be able to respond to that. So the youth organizations, youth structures will be able really to be strong and competent partners in that sense, and that will be able and have competences really to affect the policies, the quality of policies, and the progress on where it is going. For us, so I'll just mention like something that we are working in our field and which is connected with that is two important topics, and that is youth organizing and capacity building in the field of youth, which are maybe two areas in which we perceive that we need more help than ever before. Migrations happening and the nature of the other problems and all of the problems I have mentioned in the beginning have caused young people to at one point lose interest or see interest in activating themselves in civil society, and they maybe get scared of responsibility easily than they were scared before. And one of the main reasons for that is that at the place where their activism starts in the local community, they have lost the support that they had maybe in the years before, and they do not have the support there, and the support is really much needed. Something that we see here is that we need to work more on the support for young individuals and non-formal groups to help them to organize better. And we need to help to raise the capacities of existing youth organizations in the field. Youth structures, like youth councils, are by its nature the only ones that can systematically and long-term help these efforts, because no matter what, and no matter the resources or finances, will always be there to help those efforts come. And something that is really important is that we need to help more medium and small organizations which are more connected to young people at the local level, where the motivation and the support is needed in order for the youth sector as such to grow in the long term, and to be able to maybe answer the moment where the political will and the political presence will be, and maybe it is right now. In general, also one general remark is that I think that the donor community, of course, need to maybe communicate more and to take more in consideration what are the systematic maybe and long-term needs, and try to fund those kind of schemes, even though it is maybe riskier and not always possible. And something that I would also like from my perspective, and the motivation is for the young for the youth structures, for the youth councils to be recognized more as agents of change, because we really try to make this change, which is sometimes ad hoc, to make it more systematical and seen in the long run. That is from my side for now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'm happy also that we hear also, let's say, focus besides the topics as such, also on strengthening youth structures, increasing youth activism as one also the need, but also part of the solution, I think, when we talk about youth agenda. We will continue immediately further. With us is also Vedad Yashari, Head of Division for Development of Youth Policies at Department of Youth, Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports of Kosovo. So please, Vedad.
Thank you, Jan. Glad to see you all. Well, what I'm going to talk is a bit of context, processes, but then needs and some data. So Western Balkans in general and young people have faced very difficult times in the end of the last century, leaving them with a number of issues and unresolved disputes to be facing in the future. Most affected countries were Bosnia and Kosovo, but also the region actually endured very high cost in its entirety as well. However, we have seen some positive change in the last 4 or 5 years. So let's say tranquility and constructive discussions among the neighbors themselves started. But also here we need to applaud support by the European Union and also the United States, who put much efforts in improving the state of play in the Western Balkans. Yet, the most important matter happening now in the region, it is awareness of the young people of the Western Balkans that they share more similar challenges across the region than they ever thought of. And this is a key starting point. Last few years, a number of joint agreements and programs concluded by our countries are a significant progress in improving and moving forward prospects for young people in the Western Balkans. And I must emphasize here also the establishment of Regional Youth Cooperation Office, which Jan is now moderating this event. And I think such initiatives should follow up. You know, it's not just RICO, but also other initiatives should follow up. Mobility of young people from Kosovo especially remains an enormous challenge. And here we are talking about administrative obstacles. Like Kosovo young people are the only in the region who do not enjoy free visa regime with the EU. But also traveling to Bosnia and Herzegovina and to Serbia for Kosovo young people is very difficult, close to impossible. And as Ms. Brego mentioned, that they are working this comment, the ID, traveling with IDs, and this is very positive news for us. So young people should have access to any place they want to visit and study in the region in Europe. Nowadays, actually, one of the most critical matters we are facing is high unemployment rate among young people. And this actually has contributed to a vast number of youngsters looking for better opportunities and try their chances to other EU countries, causing a serious brain drain effect in the region, which is not, if it's not tackled appropriately, will have long-term effects in the region, but also Kosovo as well. Increasingly engaging active young people with less burden from the past are promoting cooperation of our region. Digital technologies and internet is regularly used for communication and further improve the prospects of our young people, creating a generation which is demanding and pushing reforms to education system, but also improve the support to innovation and research. A few data: in 2013, Kosovo had 62 enterprises working in ICT related fields, whereas in 2018, there were over 1,000 new enterprises in the ICT related fields, which is really a remarkable development of this industry in Kosovo. Last but not least, a constructive dialogue initiated should continue between the region and the EU as the most important stakeholder to intensify support focusing on youth, as this would help the region to further strengthen their human capacities and such accelerate regions' own integration, but also with the EU. While Kosovo is committed to focusing on education and training of young people with 21st century skills, in supporting the reduction of unemployment as the biggest challenge for Kosovo's young people, and therefore the support and assistance by international donors and partners is crucial, let's say irreplaceable and most welcome, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of know-how. So in conclusion, I have to say this, that without any doubt that the future of the region are its young men and women. So thank you very much for your attention. And in case you have any questions, please feel free.
Thank you very much, Vedat. I'm happy also that you emphasized among different topics also this huge challenge for youth mobility of Kosovo, but also of some other economies in the region as a very relevant area. And also when we talk about youth employment, you emphasized also very interesting sector of IT, which brings also some solutions, I think, in this regards, how to invest more and how to, let's say, link certain activities with this very relevant and more relevant sector, I think, in economy. We move further, and with us is Angela Radovanovic, representing Youth Network of Montenegro, and also she's a program manager of Association of Youth with Disabilities. So please, Angela.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear RCC, thank you for invitation and opportunity to speak today at this event. Considering current situation, challenges in front of youth are numerous, and many young people are left behind with lack of opportunities to actively participate and contribute to societies they live in. Although numerous programs are in place to support youth, they should inclusively address needs of all youth. One of the main challenges we face is lack of interest of youth to be members of the civil society organizations and work towards achievement of the common goals. This particularly relates to youth coming from marginalized groups like persons with disabilities. They mainly see CSOs as a place to fill the gap caused by the system when it comes to education, social support, etc. These gaps very often relate to the basic skills others take for granted, like foreign languages, IT and media literacy, communication. At the beginning, they do not have equal opportunities, and it takes at least 2 to 3 years to gain skills, knowledge, and confidence to be able to participate as their peers without disabilities. Therefore, CSOs are not only a place for their activism, but also a place to learn, to get self-acceptance and personal development, and at the end, go towards independent living. When this process ends, youth are having more opportunities, but they rarely decide to stay in CSOs and seek professional development in other sectors. This remains a challenge to be solved by the CSOs. How to develop internally, how to make our programs and activities attractive to youth, to come, to contribute, and to stay there as support and role models to other young people who are facing same challenges and barriers they had before. With this in place, we could work towards other needs, cooperation between youth organizations in the region, networking, etc. One more point of concern is related to COVID-19 recovery. It should not only include measures for social and economic recovery, like my colleagues already mentioned, but also address the issues that significantly affected youth, especially youth from marginalized groups or from rural areas. It should include psychological support, social support, for example, establishment of peer support groups, including online ones, and development of communication skills, IT, media literacy, so on, followed by improvements of the educational system and creation of programs that would enable youth to find a job more easy, to keep it and progress its career. All this could result in strengthened youth who are ready to answer to any challenge in the future and contribute to the development of the whole region. And I really hope this meeting will be one more step in the successful achievement of the goal I strongly believe all share, to create equal opportunities for participation of every young person from the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I'm also happy to see that you emphasized particularly youth interest in engagement, but also that you spend time on focusing on marginalized and vulnerable groups of young people and how important and priority is also inclusion of them. From Montenegro, we go without PCR test to North Macedonia, and there is Georgi Tasev, Youth and Sport Advisor in Prime Minister's Office, Government of North Macedonia. So please, let's hear also some of the priorities in North Macedonia.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone from cloudy Skopje. First of all, I want to thank the RCC team for the given opportunity to be one of the panelists of the first donor meeting and to present key needs regarding the youth as well as strategic priorities which might require support in the future of the Republic of North Macedonia. What is crucial to emphasize is that youth and youth organizations are partners of the government, and together they make all decisions related to youth. Added value for the realization of all processes is that North Macedonia last year adopted the law on youth participation and youth policies, which is an excellent roadmap for defining the forms of youth organizations and their active involvement in decision-making processes. This law provides opening of youth center, youth offices, register of youth organizations, guaranteed budget for youth, strategic document, youth office, local youth councils, and creation of national advisory body, following the example of co-management system where both institution and youth form of organizations together will make decision of interest to young people. Among the other priorities, the implementation of this systematic law is key priority of the government. From here, I want to emphasize that also that the youth guarantee scheme this year will receive a legal framework and will be implemented throughout the country, as well as the new operational plan for employment for 2021, which will strengthen and support the labor market in the country to overcome the consequences of the COVID crisis. All measures foreseen in the operational plan, such as self-employment, wage subsidy, internship program, public works program, etc., are support for those who lost their jobs in the crisis, their return to the labor market, and to encourage balanced regional development. However, these 15 months, the COVID-19 crisis has caused particular problems in the areas of education, employment, mental health, and disposable income among young people. In my opinion, as key areas and priorities may be well supported by donors, I would single out the following, like measures to facilitate youth re-employment through retraining, because a large number of young people have lost their job, and some of them are threatened with losing them. That is why these people need to be covered by measures for employment and retraining. And also I want to emphasize this because a number of young people lost their jobs, namely the youth unemployment rate from the first quarter of 2020 was 27.3% and quickly increased by almost 4% in quarter 3 of 2020, and is now 31.2%. This is why I suggest these measures to facilitate youth re-employment of the young people. The second suggestion is digitalization of education-related process in order to facilitate access for students following new trends, but also needs to create digital societies and offer services more digitally instead of these traditional ways of delivering services, just like waiting in long queues before counters. Mainly this is the target we should all be moving toward. The third one is psychological support for young people in these times, since it is known that the young people are among the most affected by the crisis. Next is this internal migration, as also mentioned the Albanian colleague, that have a problem with rural youth moving to the urban areas and large cities, and that is something we should like to be focused on in the next period. The next one is development of youth infrastructure in terms of helping the open of youth centers, youth offices, business hub, accelerators, which are a great opportunity for young people to develop, socialize, acquire skills, and jointly develop societies where they live. And the last one recommendation is, especially now in this pandemic, we saw the importance of internet in order to stay connected. But the dark side of this is that there is a huge rise of fake news, and the media literacy is still on a very low level. Thus, in the following period, we have to focus on raising the awareness and building people's competences, how to recognize and fight fake news. In my opinion, those are the key challenges that not only as a country, but also as a Balkan and economies have before us. And that is why I believe that these area needs some key measures and priorities that will enable us to move forward and create progressive societies.
Thanks a lot. I think also this comment on implications of the COVID are very relevant. And tomorrow, as you could see in program, there's also area of emergency responses, and I think this is something very important for everyone. And also inside of that, as you emphasized, re-employment, but also this digitalization of education, I think can be very interesting also as areas of interventions in the future. And the last but not the least, we will close the round with Uroš Savić-Kajin, President of the Steering Committee at National Youth Council of Serbia. The same question also on priorities and youth needs in Serbia.
Hello, Jan. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I want to thank the RCC for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to share what is indicated by the research in our past experience as essential for improving the position of youth in Serbia. So without further ado, I want to dive into the obstacles. Most of them were mentioned by my predecessors, and that's why I think it would be more productive if once we go over these specific topics to talk about how they can be addressed and how they can be financed. So unemployment, education, as my predecessor has already pointed out, the COVID-19 pandemic has pointed out many flaws. We identified many flaws in the educational system, and we know based on our research that there are 10 to 15% of young people in Serbia who cannot access their regular education in their classes during the lockdown. So education, social inclusion, as it was already mentioned by some of my predecessors, it seems that we pretty much share similar realities when it comes to this. And, all of these problems like unemployment, discrimination of youth, social inclusion or social exclusion are the reason why young people migrate from Serbia. So how can we go about these issues? How can we solve them? One of the things that is very important is dialogue, and we believe that establishing dialogue on all government levels, from the national to local, is very important because there are some specific local contexts in Serbia where it's essential that the local authorities talk to young people in their communities, and to be able to identify these problems through joint efforts rather than just bringing about some policies that have not been discussed with the youth from the community where this policy will be implemented. So, of course, monitoring the outcomes of the dialogues is also very important. So addressing all these issues and establishing dialogue itself is not enough. It's very important that we have this continuity, that we can monitor and see what results have been achieved from the last dialogue to the present one. And that brings me to the next important thing is that when we talk about migration, there have been many studies, and it has been indicated by our experience as well, that when young people have a say, they stay. So involving young people in all the decision-making processes, especially those that affect their position and their lives, is essential if we want them to stay in their home countries. Another issue that is present in Serbia is that there are districts where the youth have fewer opportunities, and significantly fewer opportunities than their peers from, let's say, the capital city or some other larger cities. So it's very important to both make open calls and finance projects that are directed towards these districts that don't offer enough opportunities for their youth. And these, of course, districts have the same resources available that all the other districts and their organizations in them have, but due to the poor socioeconomical status of these districts, they do not have the capacities yet to use these resources and to have access to them through open calls. So directing open calls only towards these districts, which are pointed out in several of our analysis. There is an alternative report that we publish every year as the National Youth Council of Serbia. So that can be found online and can be a great guideline to what districts donors should target. And that brings me to the next issue, and that is financing the long-term programs as opposed to just financing short-term projects. If we want to tackle any of these issues, any of the issues my predecessors mentioned, and if we want to establish long-term dialogue and to ensure that once the project is implemented, there will still be something, it's very important that we simply finance programs and that we focus on long-term care for youth. So if we don't have this systematic approach, if we don't try to do something every year to monitor our results, to evaluate, and then go in the next year with these insights, then we will not come very far, because without this continuity, without the ability to measure what we have invested in, how has it paid off, and what we need to invest in next, it's very difficult to successfully improve the position of youth anywhere, I believe, and of course in Serbia.
Thank you very much, Uroš. Thank you, all 6 of you. If we were in a real conference, you will get applause after the 6 short and precise and concrete presentations. Now, I mean, if I would like to take the key words from 6 presentations, I think it was, let's say, from youth employment, connection with the labor market and education, impact in education also from COVID side. So we heard about digitalization. Then it was also some other areas of, let's say, youth issues, from migrations, mobility, to vulnerable and marginalized groups. And then also with Uroš, we emphasize this area of dialogue and youth participation and involvement of the youth sector, youth councils and other structures in solution part. But also I think certain areas like IT sector and some other are also, let's say, more and more relevant as a part of the solution when we talk about youth needs. I'm pretty sure, and with organizers, as we are a bit late, we figure out that the real discussion will happen tomorrow in these 3 areas. The idea of today is to hear a bit from experts' input. After that, these 6 presentations coming jointly from the governments and youth sector, and after the coffee break, to hear also donors' plans. So the first day is, let's say, less interactive, but more input oriented from different angles. So please leave your ideas for discussion for tomorrow, but I still can give you opportunity for a few questions, just maybe for the matter of clarification in direction of 6 economies rather than for real discussion. And then we will move on short coffee break, unfortunately without chit chat among each other and mingling around. And I'm a bit really sad for that opportunity for almost a year, but at least you can bring your best cup of coffee and come back to us. Before that, any question, you can raise your hand in case that you would like to ask some of these 6 colleagues anything. Also, there is, which I think Anna used this Q&A. She also asked additional questions about resource youth centers, and there is also a nice answer from our colleague from Open Society. Do we see any hand? I cannot see the whole audience, but I'm looking and scrolling down attendees of the event. In case not now, definitely keep your ideas and inputs based also on these presentations for tomorrow. And maybe I will just ask Ognjen, as it's 11:36, so we are, I think, 6 minutes late, just to confirm when the next session will start. It is about also donor perspective in the region. So thank you very much for this session, and Ivana or
Yes.
Ognjen, please tell us what's next.
Thank you very much, Jan, and huge thanks to all 6 panelists. We looked into the questions and we didn't see any raised hands, but maybe after we finish also with the part with the donors, and tomorrow we can go into more details and have more, let's say, exchange if there is something specific that you would like to know. And as what Jan said, unfortunately, if it would be a normal meeting, we would be having a real life coffee break, which almost all of us forgot how actually it looks like. Nevertheless, I suggest before we go into the next session with the inputs from the donors who are together with us, that we make this 10-minute break. So now it's 10:38, and I would like to invite you all that we are back in 10 minutes time. So 10:48, and which is more or less close to the initial agenda and planning. Again, thanks a lot for this first segment, and then see you back in 10 minutes time. Dear all, welcome back. I hope that you had a chance to stretch your legs a little bit and to take some rest from the first but very interesting part, I would say, of today's meeting. And as you know, as you've seen in the agenda, we are moving slowly to another segment of our meeting, to the presentations of the current donor programs and interventions. And I would like at the very beginning to wish a warm welcome to Mr. Andy Dobrushi, our regional coordinator in Western Balkan Foundation and an executive director of OSFA, who was dealing with the mapping exercise that we are referring to today on many occasions. Mr. Dobroshi will present to us the main findings which we identified during mapping exercise related to donors and their interventions. And during the short break, we were in a communication and we decided, in order to make this segment more engaging and more interesting for all of us, that Andy will talk to you while we had the PowerPoint presentation which we prepared for this, which we're going to share with you after the meeting, the same as for the first one of Valeriana, so that you can have them with you, but simply for the sake of the time and in order to boost more engagement, we will hear from Mr. Dobrushi as he speaks. Thank you very much. Andy, thank you for being with us, and I'm giving the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivana. I hope I'm heard well. Good morning,
yes,
everyone. It's a real pleasure to be part of this event, especially after listening the colleagues, the first panel. You know, it was very inspiring to see the input that comes from youth and from people who are directly linked with this very important issue for the region and for the future of the region. And I think also in the context of a pandemic and everything else that we've been through for the past year and a half, basically, the topic becomes also very, very relevant, you know. Very briefly, I decided basically not to go, as Ivana explained, on the PowerPoint, because I think that would make the whole engagement kind of, you know, dull and not really pertinent to youth. You know, like, I think we should feed youth with less PowerPoints, you know, but more concrete discussions and actions, you know, which is relevant. And I think the energy that we saw in the policy panel, it was indicative of that. So, but very briefly on the donors. On the donors' perspective and their engagement with youth. This is a part of the way that the research was structured. Basically, is based on desk research, on interviews with key donors in the region, and also with web research. What came out of this report? There are basically over 200 institutional donors in the region who are active in the Western Balkans, excluding here the private cooperation. And the study basically finds and reveals that all the donors have supported many programs, projects, and other initiatives in the area of rule of law, economic advancement and education, social and economic justice, sustainable development, citizen activism, and human rights and civil society strengthening, with the principal recipients of projects being CSOs at both central and local government level. Now, what is striking here is that, and might be also instrumental for further discussions. Of course, the EU has taken a very important leading role in the coordination of all youth activities, and that's a good applaud goes to this institution for doing that. But at the regional level, there is a lack of coordination on youth, and I think this is very important to take out on the mapping that it was done. Youth has not been identified as a specific targeted area of intervention. However, the study on the donors' work indicates a rising interest in youth. Education and youth are becoming strategic areas of interventions as donors in the regions are increasingly viewing education and economic development as essential instruments in reversing the worrying trend of young people leaving, migrating in search of better opportunities. And I think this became very clear and very evident also during the discussions in the first panel. In spite of the fact that the donor mapping reveals that youth are generally among the key target groups in the donor programs, usually they are either in the parlance of donors, either mainstreamed or integrated. So you don't see a specific target as youth, you know. So and I think this is something that will definitely deserves a considerable attention in the policies and in the approach of donors regarding the youth in the future. Whereas youth is a core mission at the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, Southeast European Youth Network, SALTO, and the European Union Erasmus Youth Program, this is basically where we see it very, very limited in terms of real focus. And while there is a diversity in the manner, funds, and timeframes of donor support of youth in the Western Balkans, they usually target them in three ways: either by directly targeting youth policies and legal frameworks by providing financial and technical assistance to the governments and related bodies, like, for example, development of youth strategies, youth action plans, and youth laws. And this is done through various vehicles, you know, like through OSCE in some areas, UN, or the embassies of the EU and other economies. The second modus operandi is through indirectly targeting youth by providing financial and technical assistance to the government and related bodies on youth-related policy areas, such as education, social inclusion, health, employment, vocational and educational training, participation in the political process, etc. Or in the third way is addressing issues of interest to youth by providing direct financial technical assistance, networking, or other support to youth organizations. Now, the most prominent donors in the region, such as EU, GIZ, and SDC, primarily support education, employment, vocational education, and entrepreneurship, and recently the environment, sustainable development, and youth. Whereas US embassies and USAID has funded youth primarily in terms of civic and political participation, inter-ethnic relations and peace building, as well as security issues related to radicalization and extremism. The mapping shows that most of the attentions of funding so far by donors at the regional level has been on civil and political participation, intercultural dialogue, human rights, education, employment, and entrepreneurship. So basically, these are recurring themes in the whole agenda of donors. What was the important thing here, and it was very difficult to identify, is basically also the financial aspects, you know. So it was very difficult to target and I understand clearly, you know, what portion of their funding the donors allocate to youth issues, you know, given that, you know, if we go back to the mainstreaming of youth issue in other areas of donors' work. So I think this is really very important to keep in mind and bear in mind in the working of donors in the future. Another thing which I guess is very important is, as I mentioned, the context, you know, the pandemic and how much this has affected, you know. Many donors, actors in the region are basically reviewing their work, you know, with the view of how to basically re-energize also the engagement in many issues that probably were not seen as relevant in the previous past, in the near past, but because of the pandemic and the effects that the pandemic has had, they've become really prominent and should become prominent in the agenda of donors, specifically targeting in youth. And I think especially here, the education becomes a very crucial topic, and it was mentioned also by colleagues, also by Nenad and Uros, you know, in their presentations. The key, and these are my personal remarks, you know, like without wanting to go further in the recommendations, etc. You know, like, because recommendations, of course, they deal with you know, increasing the support, providing financial capacity, skills, networking, advocacy, mobility that was mentioned frequently, exchange and mentoring for youth in this quadruple helix, you know, like basically youth engagement with academia, research, civil society and policy sector, media and private sector. And the fact that the youth issues should be recognized in the donors' overall strategic priority and plans, we're trying to change the approach, as I said, from mainstreaming or integrated to include a specific sector, including a horizontal youth cooperation. But the important thing here is, for me personally, and I hope this provides food for thoughts for also for tomorrow's discussion, is like basically how do donors should tailor these approaches, in order to build resilience for future shocks, and from health to environmental issue. And this is not this is about like basically empowering youth, recognizing especially particularly their primacy in the human dimension of our countries. And this is not only about pressuring the governments to step up their actions in this area, but I think this crisis that we've seen the past year has also catalyzed the innovations and partnerships in the recovery of post-pandemic. And I think youth has an incredibly and particularly important role in this, in building and creating more flexible, collaborative, and personalized learning systems especially for youth. And I think an additional imperative, very important, is also to provide youth with the skills to create a more sustainable, just, and peaceful future. And I think in this particular area, also the education systems have to be oriented towards stakes, which are the key word, like the green and digital economy, the creative economy, and the need to give the youth, the knowledge and the mindset to respond to climate change and all the essential threats that the region is not immune. So most important, also equally important, I think the need to build resilience to disinformation that has spiraled out during this pandemic, and the need to connect also the learning processes in youth, to real life issues. To foster awareness and responsibility towards issues that are relevant in the region. And I think it was also mentioned that also the pandemic has laid bare also many issues of inequalities. And I think in this perspective also this is an issue and topic that also donors have to bear in mind, and which really affects the youth in many dimensions, and it's very well linked intersectionally with many issues that the youth face. So in my mind, the mapping of donors, on the report, which is, and then the presentation, which is more detailed and will be shared with all the colleagues, I think stands as a mirror also with the concerns that all the colleagues raised. So how do we correlate better this the mapping, the current mapping, and how we also, this discussion also helps donor to focus better, but also to respond to the needs. I mean, we talk all the time about coordination, etc., and all the issues which are very relevant for our region. But I think this has to start primarily from donors. I think this is an example that the donors should set. Also making clear and transparent also the financial contributions or the financial plans that they intend to dedicate specifically to youth. And I think this is also really, really important, for and one of the most important takeouts of all the mapping. And creating also a donor coordination database in the field of youth, which would enhance also the monitoring or offer a comprehensive evaluation of the projects, good practices, etc. I think this would become very handy in the exchange of also good practices and good examples that can help the youth in the region to interact much better with each other. So I'll stop here trying to respect the time frame, but this is primarily the main takeouts that we saw in the donor mapping during this exercise. So thank you so much for the attention, and I hope this was useful and relevant to also to the discussion today, but hope most importantly to the more detailed discussions tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dobrushi. It is our pleasure to have you today with us. So as to present the key donor mapping when it comes to the interventions of donors in regards to youth. And I will use the opportunity also to thank Bleriana, Bleriana for her commitment in the previous couple of months, having in mind that we wanted to map the legal, institutional, strategic frameworks in all Western Balkan 6, but also to see what are the key donor interventions, and on the very end, what is the impact of COVID-19 on the youth in the Western Balkans. I am Ognjen Markovic, project expert of the Western Balkans Youth Lab, and I will be moderating the following panel. And as Mr. Dobrushi said, it is really interesting to see so many spaces for cooperation and synergy building in the region. And as per our knowledge, there is no informal or formal coordination mechanism at the regional level, and therefore we are really happy to see from all of you who are today with us your good willingness and openness to be part of the broad coalition on youth and to contribute to the online platform and the coalition itself in the next period. Since we had individual consultations with each donor representatives, but also with youth and policymakers who are also today with us. And I have to personally thank to all of you for your active participation and for your great contribution in the first panel, as well as to Jan, who was moderating the discussion. And I believe that those inputs are very valuable for everyone coming from donor community today. And as we wanted somehow to have first this general overview of the donor interventions in the region, also we wanted to see what are the ongoing initiatives as well as the planned ones in the future, so that on the other side, this time policymakers and youth can actually learn from donors themselves what are actually the key initiatives that are going on in the region. So as we are already a bit late, I don't want to take much of your time, but rather invite our first panelist out of 9 that we will have today to present key initiatives and maybe some lessons learned. And therefore, I'm kindly inviting Ms. Alexandra Miladinovic, Regional Coordinator for Policy and Stakeholders Relations in Western Balkans, Advice for Small Businesses from European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Alexandra, thank you very much for being with us, and I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Ognjen. I hope you can hear me and see me well. Okay, super. Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to have opportunity to present and attend this interesting meeting, and many thanks to all of you who organized such platform and inviting us, of course. I would start with sharing first that EBRD's strategic and capital framework sets 3 main areas, which are digitalization, green, and inclusive, focused to youth and gender, with other inclusion groups, of course. And the bank basically focuses to these topics throughout the whole bank portfolio. I myself come from EBRD's Advice for Small Business team, covering Western Balkan region for policy and stakeholder relations. And I also manage team and activities of advisory team here in Serbia. And recognizing the need and the importance of strengthening youth in business, our team has partnered with financial institution team of EBRD and discussed it with the donors. And we are very glad to share that in December last year, we signed an agreement with Sweden, with SIDA, to implement this program together in the Western Balkans region. And it's a pleasure to also have our donor representative on the panel so we can hear them as well. This program, a Youth in Business program, was initially signed for 3 years period as the first phase, hoping to have a full duration of the program of 5 years with potential second phase included. And in short, this program covers 2 main components: access to finance and access to business advice, both crucial for strengthening youth SMEs and ecosystems in countries of operation. Target groups are MSMEs, local and private-owned entities with overall a managerial responsibility held by a young person, or owned a majority or completely by youth. Age limit is 35 years. Access to finance component, just to briefly mention what that envisages. basically up to 50 million euros of credit lines will be given to our partner financial institutions in the countries for on lending to youth MSMEs. They will, partner financial institutions will also receive capacity building technical assistance that will be provided by the experts. It is currently at EBRD's internal approval phase, and it is expected to be completed sometime around Q3 this year, which is basically subject to identification of pilot banks in the countries of operation. Access to know-how for youth MSMEs component covers advisory services as well as business development networking through close cooperation with partner institutions. Basically, we will implement trainings, mentoring, capacity building on both accelerators and support youth in business association level and on SMEs level. Access to finance component for these first 3 years of the program that I mentioned as the first phase plans to include at least 66 youth MSMEs supported through advisory services, to organize and deliver 12 training courses held on different topics of interest, to reach out at least 500 youth MSMEs through different networking events, seminars, etc., and to also include 6 partner institutions to be engaged on the program. The plan is to have at least one partner institution per country of operations. Total donor contributions here, 2 million euros, again, emphasizing it is for this first 3 years period that we initiated recently. Regarding advisory component of this program, basically all preconditions are set. Glad to share that we just recently started our first advisory projects here in Serbia. We will continue working in this online delivery mechanism, modeled at least being flexible to change it as soon as circumstances allowed it. Activities on pipeline development are also initiated across the region, as well as mapping of potential partner organization stakeholders. And that is done on 2 levels, so to say, or 3 levels, basically on regional, local level, developing cooperation with current and new stakeholders, and also liaising with government entities, business associations, and NGOs. We do plan to, and we are negotiating with, discussing with our donors to organize some sort of soft launch of the program. As I mentioned, we are still waiting for this access to finance component to be properly launched and all preconditions set. While for advisory component, we are ready to initiate all activities that are planned within the program. I'm cautious of the time, but I think that it's, as previous speakers also mentioned, it's great that we have this opportunity to have such platform and to best utilize all our resources and to ensure synergy. So looking forward to cooperate with all of you further going further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you for being with us and sharing your new programs. And it's really encouraging to hear about the 66, if I remember well, youth SMEs and first advisory project being launched. And definitely, maybe this is the occasion also to invite our youth representatives to follow your work and definitely to engage, as these opportunities are really relevant, especially now in the COVID times, and having in mind also what panelists during the first panel said in regards to unemployment and limited access of youth to employment opportunities. Since we are already a bit late with the time, I will not take too much of it, but rather give the floor to Ms. Leila Fetahagic, Senior Policy Advisor from Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Leila, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you for your presentation. It was really very useful. I will try to be very short. First of all, maybe to explain that we don't have a youth program as a program itself, probably like most of the donors, but we have, besides other programs, we have a MATRA call. And these are actually programs that are leading to sustainable relationship between civil society and the government in an area of democracy. And then we have a policy area which are very important to us and close. These are rule of law, including reform of judiciary, public administration, fight against corruption, organized crime. Then we have a respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms, freedom of expression, independent media, social and economic reforms, and stability and security. This open call is open for whole year, and usually local NGOs are applying to us. And so youth, gender is like a cross-cutting issue in all our programs. And at this moment, it's really for us important that we can find opportunities to actually complement with others who is doing a similar work, because sometimes it's very often that there is no enough donor coordination, and with our small activities we can actually, if somebody is having like you a strategy, we can fill the gap. And one of our activities, actually, I will just give you examples where we are active. It's actually empowering youth, especially with youth leaders in civil society, in local communities. And we actually worked with the local youth leaders in 23 local communities, and probably we will continue to work with them. Then we also, our focus was actually on employment, social inclusion, and reconciliation. With employment, we were very much focused on social entrepreneurship and employment of, let's say, persons with disabilities and youth with special needs. And through that, through our programs, we actually supported employment and companies of actually 20 social entrepreneurship companies. And we will continue to work on that in future. Also, we are working very much on internet freedom and actually questions both to privacy related issues and data manipulation, because we realize that mostly youth are hit with these problems. So we have a lot of activities that are related to youth, but we don't have strategies and special focus, so we will continue to work in this area. I hope that I didn't take too much time. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Leila, and it is really a pleasure to see you again. And of course, thank you very much for your valuable input. And as you said, even though maybe you are not directly supporting youth, all of these topics that you mentioned are very relevant, especially if we bear in mind these key findings of the mapping that RCC commissioned this year. And as we could learn, digital literacy, fake news, and topics like that are something that is becoming more and more important when we speak about youth from the Western Balkans. And therefore, I hope that also in future we will be able to involve young people in all processes that actually matter to them, starting from judiciary, why not, until participation in decision-making processes. Again, as you said, that you are working closely with on building sustainable dialogue among CSOs and public administrations. That is definitely something that we are also working on, but on the level of cooperation between national youth councils, youth umbrella organizations, and public administrations in the Western Balkans. Also, it is my pleasure to say that today we are having with us Mr. Nedim Bukvic, Program Officer from the Embassy of Sweden. We already heard from Alexandra a bit of how the Sweden is supporting youth in the Western Balkans, but nevertheless, Nedim, we are looking forward to hear from you about your support towards youth agenda in the Western Balkans. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ognjen. Thank you, everyone, for this excellent opportunity to get a lot of input across different colleagues working in different institutions. Also echoing Alexandra's comment about the relatively new Swedish support. Thank you for that, and looking forward to use this platform as one way to improve, let's say, the dialogue with the projects and also with the financiers in this respect. So to mention a little bit the SIDA background, I can say that I've been responsible officer. I'm the national program officer working for the embassy, of course, and I've been responsible for the national program part of the portfolio dealing with youth, and that has primarily been working with Kult Institute for 3 years now, almost full 3 years. Also working with Mosaic Foundation during, let's say, a little bit shorter period of time, but also relatively new partnerships. I can mention perhaps some larger programs for SME support, which SIDA is very much has invested a lot of money in over the years. That is the Challenge to Change program implemented by SERDA RAX in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And also we've been working on the policy framework for SMEs in this country primarily through the Enterprise Development Agency in Banja Luka. So these are kind of our core partners, how should I say. We have been also in the active labor market measures with the World Bank, experimenting a little bit there for 2 years now with the private provision of employment services. It's a pilot. It is with Collective, and we are still waiting on some results out of that program. That program is also focused on youth. Now, when I say youth, it's basically for us, this means Kult as our, how should I say, flagship project or program. For 3 years now, they've been working. They've been working before we started financing, on long before we came in as financiers, and we've recently had an evaluation of this program, which is pointing to a relevance. Now, the program, it has different components. It's focused on education, both on the supply and the demand side. Supply being the local and canton level authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and on the demand side, it's the right holders, the young people, young women and men, through basically empowerment programs, skills and training programs, confidence building, etc. But it's also about capacity building on the local government levels, as I mentioned, and that the relevance is stated there as strong. Positive outcomes are seen in these mechanisms, at the local government level, which Kult has worked on over the past years. The investments in knowledge are pointing towards some kind of an expanded critical mass in the sector, although it's not really specific on what that is and how let's say make that critical mass more definable as a quantifiable object. But it works. The training programs CULT has are working with youth leaders, also young politicians as well. So they have these two-pronged approaches with the training programs that they have. The sustainability, as expected, was not assured, and there are different reasons for that. Of course, we can see a lot of problems in the sense that, how are these, mechanisms going to be institutionalized, the services, the practices. There are a lot of risk factors, staff turnovers, institutional changes that severely impact any kind of capacity building investments by the donors. So these are the problems, at least according to this evaluation that I just quickly ran through its conclusions. Not everything is, of course, under CULT's influence, and clearly a lot of these factors are outside. But yeah, it's the legislative framework, implementation of the legislative framework, which is definitely a risk factor, I would say, for sustainability of our donor investments in this regard. With Mosaic, it's very much focused on entrepreneurship. That program is still not finished, still needs to be evaluated. But Mosaic has, apart from, let's say, mobilizing funds for entrepreneurship, they also have a mentoring component through this platform that they've developed, LONATS, called LONATS. And that's also very important to say, is that it's not just about it's about connecting the different dots in the services. That is very difficult to do, particularly across different projects. Now, CULT and Mosaic do cooperate, and then that's good, because they have kind of carved out their areas which they want to be in, and but then that it's a graduation from one program to another, and in this particular case, it's the mentoring aspect, which CULT does not provide, Mosaic does. So this is all very beneficial and leveraging. I think this is where we want to go in the future, is to see a lot more leveraging between the different projects. We want to see these dots connected. We want to see on the institutional side more sustainability and let's say more detailed plans for how to make this happen. Including dialogue, more frequent dialogue, perhaps with the partners, but also with the governments in this respect. So coordination, definitely a problem. Definitely, I think we can all attest to that, and have to see how we can deal with that issue. And then, but entrepreneurship is not the only lever. It's not the only tool. Or funds for entrepreneurship. There are other means and ways, and one is this. CULT has been working on volunteering, implementation of at least in the federation, the law on volunteering. It seems to me that is mostly on the public sector side, but I get the feeling that one could do this with the private sector as well, with internship programs, etc. Seems to me that this is kind of left undeveloped, as in relation to, let's say, already established mechanisms and funds for entrepreneurship support. Mosaic may have more let's say more in that sense, created more programmatic results in that sense. So that's kind of the extent of the Swedish program. Both projects are close to ending. We are quite, I should say, open. We are expecting new strategy after the summer to operationalize it. and we expect to remain in the sector. We have yet to see how how we will operationalize the strategy. We will definitely use these evaluation lessons learned from the evaluations in order to do that. But again, looking forward to this excellent platform that is being established at a very good time. I think the timing is definitely excellent for this, and looking forward to being part of this platform in the future. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bukvic, thank you for being with us and for sharing, let's say, your experience with these two programs. And we are also very happy to hear about all your activities when it comes to empowerment of young people, capacity building, especially at local level, as well as your initiatives in regard to entrepreneurship. All of them being very relevant for young people, as we could learn so far from the mapping exercise. But on the other side, I believe from our personal let's say, environment and what can we see throughout the region when it comes to the position of young people in our societies. And definitely, I wish you good luck with the strategy, and I hope that you will continue with this path of supporting young people in the region. Of course, relying on those lessons learned, and also, I hope that this informal donor coordination mechanism will help you also to build synergies with some of other organizations that are working in this field. And I'm very happy to hear so far from all three of you that you find this idea once again very relevant, and we are looking forward to all the success that we are going to have with this broad coalition on youth. Having that in mind, now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Maria Pudaric, external collaborator for the youth program in the Embassy of Switzerland. Maria, the floor is yours, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ogden, and thank you all for this opportunity today. I hope you hear me. Oh, great. So it is very nice to be today here with you, especially as I can't wait to read the research that you've done and to get all the inputs, because I think all this collateral and all this combined information is very valuable to all donors in the region and to SDC as well. I would like to say that we as SDC are working in 5 of the 6 Western Balkans countries, in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. And as such, as you already mentioned, we are mostly focused on education and entrepreneurship and employment of youth, because we see that it's very connected to the livelihoods of youth, that youth need more skills to be better prepared for the job markets, to be able to work and maybe open their own SMEs, to be able to fund their living and to contribute to their cities and the countries that they come from. So that means that we are working mostly on vocational education training in almost all of our countries that we are working in, as well as working on mechanisms to enable youth to be better prepared for the employment market and to be better prepared with skills and for the future. I think this is very interesting, especially as you said and mentioned that most of the donors are working in these kind of areas, as we see it as an opportunity to prepare youth for their future. As well as that, we are also thinking that and working on topics such as combating stereotypes on gender, as we think healthy lifestyles are very important for youth in the Western Balkans, and there's a huge need to empower young people to speak up and say their minds and help each other to make a better living. So that we think that these kind of programs are very important. As I have to mention, almost all our programs are 10 to 12 years long. So we are talking about not short-term projects, but really influencing the beneficiaries and the people that we work with. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have an additional thing that we are having and going on. It is our Youth Advisory Board, and we are very proud that we have it. It's a board combined of 10 young people from all over Bosnia that are between the ages of 16 and 22, and they are really our advisors. They're taking part in our events, they advising us on new project phases, talking to our partners, giving us suggestions what we can do better, giving us new ideas. As somebody in the previous panel said, it is very important to make youth the decision makers, to give them the opportunity to influence what is being served to them. We are very much aware that all of our projects and programs are influencing the day-to-day life of all the citizens of these countries, and as well the youth. And when we're talking about projects and programs that are going on 10 to 12 years, it's very much likely that some of the young people that are now 16 years will be direct beneficiaries in 10 years of the impacts of our projects. And that's why we really need to take them in consideration. And I'm very happy that tomorrow one of our members of the Youth Advisory Board will take part in these panels that you have prepared, since this gives us another possibility for the youth to directly engage in the work of SDC. So I would like to stop here, since you have all the information in the research you have done, and I don't want to go into detail too much on the projects, but I hope that we will receive the research soon, and that we can share the knowledge and the information between the donors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for your input. And I'm very happy to hear that you are dealing with the topics such as improving the skills of young people, but also educational policies and transition from education to labor market, as it seems that due to lack of kind of mechanisms such as youth guarantee that is existing only in North Macedonia, somehow this part of transition to the labor market to young people is becoming more and more difficult. And definitely we are needing these kind of activities that you mentioned. But being young person myself, also I am very happy to hear about your youth advisory board, and I'm sure that you are receiving a lot of good ideas from them. And as far as I remember, we had a chance also to meet some of them. And definitely, since you are working in long term when it comes to supporting youth agenda, I hope that we will have you on board also on the future donor coordination meetings, and also in meantime to discuss any possible cooperation among any actor that is attending this event today. So we will continue. Now I will give the floor to Miss Nicole Gallagher, Public Affairs Officer in U.S. Embassy in Podgorica. Miss Gallagher, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be with all of you today. Thanks for the invitation. It's been very informative to hear from you. So I am the Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Podgorica. So I'll speak a little bit today about some of our programs that focus on youth. But I want you to also know that we have a much larger public affairs section at our embassies throughout the Western Balkans. They're very active. Youth is a key audience for all of them. And we have a lot of kind of, let's say, prepackaged programs that we can pick from Washington when we're thinking about how to engage with youth. At the same time, all of our embassies have discretion and funding to really kind of tailor make our projects to involve youth and then to advance the goals of that engagement. So broadly, I would say when it comes to youth, we focus a lot on exchanges. We also focus a lot on programming that really encourages entrepreneurship, civic community engagement, and really which encourages support for diversity, tolerance, and inclusion. Just in Montenegro, over the almost 2 years I've been here, we've been seeing society become, I'd say, more polarized. A lot of the rhetoric we're seeing in public, misogynistic, hate-filled rhetoric, and a lot of that, unfortunately, is involving youth. So that's something that we're keeping in mind as we're programming, I'd say, now and going forward. but really we are focusing on what we can do to increase that support for diversity, tolerance, and inclusion across the board in society. So exchanges, we all love exchanges. They're really the gold standard for us. We love to be able to offer that in-person experience in the United States. Obviously, COVID has affected that severely. So we're looking forward to ramping up exchanges just as soon as the health situation allows. We offer a broad range of exchanges. Educationally, we offer 1-year exchanges in the United States during high school, 1 semester exchanges during university, also, shorter periods, just kind of summer programs. And we love exchanges, not just because it exposes, Montenegrins in this case, to the United States, to our culture, our values, gives that personal interaction, right? But really why I love exchanges too is it brings Montenegrins to a more international environment, right? So they can meet people, peers from the region here, but also from all over the world, right? So it's that international component. I think that really we were able to be a kind of convener in that sense. So that's wonderful. And we're also hopefully going to be able to expand some of our exchanges going forward. I'm always advocating for more funding for them. And we're also trying to join a regional initiative that's been launched by our embassy in Sarajevo called BOLD. And that focuses on basically programs to encourage entrepreneurship and civic engagement among youth. And exchanges is a key component of that. So that's a big program they're rolling out. Of course, it's been hurt by COVID, but looking forward to the post-COVID period for that in-person component. We also have kind of the upper end of the educational exchanges past undergrad. We offer the Fulbright program, Fulbright scholarship. Hopefully some of you have heard of, and that basically is focused on scholars or postgraduate degree work. And we also have a Hubert Humphrey Fellowship, which is kind of an opportunity for professional advancement. And we have other exchanges. I won't bore you with all the details, but kind of shorter 3-week exchanges, often focused on entrepreneurship, but also kind of geared towards professional development that can take folks all over the United States to meet with people who are working in their area of expertise. On top of all the exchanges, we also try really to not just send folks on exchanges, right, but when they come back, to kind of build that alumni network throughout the country. And that's something we focus on a lot. Anyone who is an alumni of one of our exchange programs automatically becomes part of that community. There's special funding opportunities for programs that we can support if they are alumni. So that's something we try to, and that's hard to do, right? But we try to encourage that when they come back to Montenegro to continue to stay in touch and to really advance some of those values and experiences as they build their future here in Montenegro. Of course, in-country programming, we do a lot with youth as well. A lot on English language learning, of course. We have a program, a 2-year program actually, called the English Access Program, which teaches high school students outside of their normal hours. So it's a big commitment. And they're always fantastic students. Helps them perfect their English, but really teaches them, leadership skills about U.S. culture, history, et cetera. And that's a wonderful program. And then, of course, we have American corners throughout the country. Well, 3 in Montenegro, more, I'm sure, in our neighboring countries. And these are kind of, cultural centers, essentially, right? So folks can come and pick up English language materials, but it's really a convening place again. And the majority of our beneficiaries are youth, starting from elementary school up through high school and then beyond. And we offer lots of different programmings, again, aligned with our policy goals. For example, we offer programming to encourage girls and young women to go into the STEM disciplines, entrepreneurship programs, business English programs, just across the board, whole lot of programs, again, with the goal of really just exposing people to that American experience. And we also focus on encouraging Montenegrins to study in the United States. We have an advising center housed at our American quarter in Podgorica to provide factual information on basically how to navigate the application process, how to look for scholarships. As some of you may know, applying for university in the United States is quite different than applying for universities in Europe. It's a very, very complicated process with lots of tests. So that's something we try to spread information about. Also, again, as I said, we kind of, tailor make our programs. We're really excited for COVID to actually engage in some sports diplomacy, which I think is just fantastic when you can. We were going to bring two American coaches from the women's national team here actually to interact with girls playing soccer throughout the country and actually to encourage women to become coaches, as apparently there's not a single female woman football coach in Montenegro. So that's something we want to address. So hopefully that program, for example, will be back online once COVID is in a better situation. And I've heard this mentioned a bit before. Media literacy, disinformation, of course, something that affects youth is something we focus on. We've supported a project of an NGO here for over 2 years, well, actually 2 years now, and they're working very closely with educational authorities to incorporate media literacy curriculum into the public schools. So that's something, of course, we focus on in different ways, but that's one of them. And then we also every year have a Democracy Commission small grants program where we just put a call out for people to put proposals forward, again, that are advancing our policy goals. And this year, one of those areas is protection of human rights and promotion of tolerance, especially among youth. So again, this idea of tolerance and diversity and inclusion, especially among youth, is something that we're looking to support now and going forward. And then just briefly to mention, the U.S. military also has a humanitarian assistance program, which is quite active in Montenegro. And they do things like revamping, refurbishing medical centers, but also schools, elementary schools, centers for children with disabilities. So that's a way that touches upon many people's lives too. So that's very positive. So I'll leave it there. So again, there's lots of kind of, I'd say, different things on the menu that we get from Washington in terms of what kind of programs we can look at. It's so nice to hear what everyone else is doing. I often say too, I don't coordinate with my counterparts at the U.S. embassies enough in the region, right? Because we're all doing what we're doing. But it's nice to be able to take a step back and hear from others as well. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for your input and presenting to us the work of the U.S. embassies in the region, but of course focusing on the embassy in Montenegro, even though there are those similar programs and projects in each of the Western Balkan states, such as Democracy Commission Small Grants Program. But on the other side, for me, it was really interesting to hear about your work when it comes to civic participation and entrepreneurship. While you also mentioned exchanges that we are all, of course, missing a lot, and actually in Western Balkans Youth Lab project we are having a component which is dedicated to representatives of youth umbrella organizations and national youth councils to actually visit each other, but also their peers, our peers in the Europe. And since we already somehow started the discussion in regard to the exchanges, it is my pleasure to announce that now the floor will be given to Mr. Jasmin Valjevac, Senior Project Manager from GIZ, and especially in light of the new regional project of the Western Balkan School Exchange scheme that I'm sure Jasmin will mention and provide us with more information, which will be very relevant for all of us being here. So Jasmin, now I give the floor to you. Thank you. I just received a message that Jasmin is having some technical issues, so therefore I'm recommending that we go further with the next panelist, and of course we will go back to Jasmin. It's great that now we are having a chance to listen more about the work of the OSCE in the region, having in mind that the mapping exercise actually showed that OSCE is one of the key donors as the ones who are being with us today, of course, having different activities when it comes to youth agenda. And therefore, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Anastasia Fusco, Policy Advisory Unit, Advisor on Youth and Security. Anastasia, warm welcome, and I give the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to represent the OSCE in this meeting. As you may know, I mean, 5 minutes to present what the OSCE does, it's a bit stretched, but I will try to focus only on the main key highlights for the moment. As you may know, one of the key aspects of our organization is its comprehensive approach to security, meaning that we work across the 3 dimensions. So politico-military aspect, economic and environmental activities, and human rights and democratic governance. And this is how we also engage with youth. So we operate under the main umbrella of OSCE commitments that have been adopted by consensus by the 57 participating states. And then in this region, each field operation mission implements them according to its mandate and in consultation with authorities. So I would just mention a few key highlights of our work there, and I will go in alphabetical order. For instance, the presence in Albania, and I would also then, of course, redirect you to my colleagues that work in the field for more details during this event and then also in the future. So the presence in Albania works with young people across the 3 dimensions and has a specific youth portfolio under the democratization department. Its main priorities are youth mainstreaming, youth activism, youth exchange, and youth with disabilities. The flagship project is the Youth Trail, promoting OSCE values in Western Balkans, which has been launched in 2017 and brings young people from the Western Balkans to visit Tirana and promote regional peace and stability. The presence, together with actually the mission to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and not only, has established a youth advisory group. So it's a group of young professionals that look into the work of the mission and provide their young perspectives, their advice. Looking ahead for this year, the mission is working on an XB project entitled Youth in Focus #2, promoting the role of youth in peace and security in Albania, which has 3 components. So strengthening the capacities for the integration of youth perspectives, fostering regional cooperation through the Youth Trail, and then wide social media outreach. The second is the mission in Kosovo, which has programmatic priorities, works on countering crimes, domestic violence, and violent extremism and radicalization. And among the key activities, as the OSCE promotes the OSCE Dialogue Academy for young women to promote dialogue between them coming from Pristina and Belgrade. And looking ahead in 2021, and this year actually, I forget that we are already in 2021, sometimes with the pandemic, they will promote the 2nd edition of the Youth Academy, where young people from different communities meet with experts and discuss topics such as human rights and non-discrimination. And moreover, since 2012, the mission promotes intercultural youth fora for students of different communities in Kosovo. The mission in Montenegro has as priorities youth engagement and regional reconciliation, and supports the RICO local branch office and the Directorate for Youth under the former Ministry of Sports and Youth. And in the upcoming period, they will provide opportunities for you to participate in youth exchange programs to gain intercultural competencies in sport. And they will continue to support the visibility of RICO local branch and the Montenegrin RICO presidency. And they will also further support the implementation of youth policy in Montenegro and the operationalization of promoting of European Youth Card among young people. The mission to Serbia works with institutions and young people towards their access to rights, to bolster their skills in addressing discrimination the vulnerable groups of young women and men are facing. And they also their support includes also inclusive youth policies and their thorough implementation throughout Serbia. The mission also is committed to enhancing regional connectivity and cooperation of young women and men, for instance, with interventions such as support the local branch of RICO, supporting the National Youth Council of Serbia in connecting, cooperating with other similar bodies in the region, and small grant scheme for Albanian Serbia youth actors to advance mutual cooperation and dialogue. And finally, and I hope I will stay in the 5 minutes, the mission to Skopje has a strong partnership with the Agency for Youth and Sports as the key national institution that is driving the implementation of the law on youth participation and youth policies. And within this framework, the mission is supporting the work of the agency, a newly established Council of Europe, and also together with the mission in Montenegro, they work with the regional youth, with the RICO. Last but not least, and linking it with the discussions that we had this morning, the mission to Serbia, together with the office of the Secretary General in Vienna and ODIHR, and we hope to expand it to the whole OSCE. We are promoting a new initiative, digital roundtable series, which aims to provide a space for sharing practices and challenges about youth inclusion in policies, processes, and programs. So we will be reaching out to some of you also to continue this discussion and get your experience, to share experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia, so much for your time, and it was really great to hear about OSCE work in the region, even though I can imagine how difficult it was somehow to sum up the work of the all missions active in the region, but still it was very informative, and we are happy to learn that there are also many initiatives of the OSCE that are open for the Western Balkans youth, so beside all of those activities that are happening at the economy level. As we had some small technical issue with representative of GIZ, now it should be resolved. So I hope that Yasmin is with us, so that we can pass the floor to him. Yasmin, warm welcome and thank you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ognjen. I hope you can see and hear me. For some reason, I was kicked out the moment before my due time in this conference. We from GIZ are somehow severely restricted in using Zoom as a platform, so I am connecting to this meeting and I have been following it since morning on my mobile phone. So I hope the connection of both video and sound is okay. I will, since I see that we are also quite short on time, I will very briefly present the areas in which we are currently as GIZ active in the region. Basically, GIZ has been in the region for over 20 years now, working on different interventions and projects when it comes to youth policy, strengthening of youth structures, civil society organizations, and so on. Currently, we have one project in preparation, which is due to start in September of this year. This project will be implemented in Serbia and will focus on strengthening and improving the perspectives of youth, especially in rural areas of Serbia. And basically, this initiative will aim to enable opportunities for youth, including returnees. This will also be one of the focuses of the project in rural areas of Serbia, to basically find a job, earn a living, and participate in actively shaping their economic and social environment. The second initiative we have at the moment is targeted for Kosovo. This is called Fit for Jobs, and it is also a 3-year project which is due to start in June this year. This project will also focus on strengthening of employability and employment perspectives, for youth and citizens, and will mostly target young people from the age of 15 to 29, and especially will have a focus on disabled children, disadvantaged groups, Roma, and families with young and then, so to say, members that are in need. So this will also be a second bilateral intervention that we will have in the region. And then the third project, which has already started implementation, project somehow to say closest to my heart because I'm the one also working on it, is a regional project, a regional initiative co-funded by the European Union and also the German government. This is a Western Balkan School Exchange Scheme. Regional initiative started in December last year and lasting until the middle of 2024. And this is a joint project we are as GIZ implementing in the all 6 Western Balkan countries together with RICO as our political partner. And basically here we will focus mainly on strengthening the capacities of RICO and also on establishing a regional school exchange scheme through which RICO will be awarding grants to school to do a cross-border student exchanges, students meaning target group between 13 and 17 years of age. So basically end of primary school and beginning of high school. So I will stop here with this short overview, and of course I'm available for any additional further on questions later on.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you very much. It was really nice to see you again and to learn again from GIZ perspective about your work. And for me, what was really valuable from your side, and thank you very much for sharing, is those initiatives that you are aiming to kick off soon, especially the one in regard to youth from rural areas in Serbia that you mentioned. And we are all already aware that, let's say, top priority, which is emerging in the Western Balkans when it comes to youth, but almost with no donor support is actually youth from rural areas. And that is why I believe it was very informative for everyone being today with us to learn about this initiative, but also about the project Fit to Jobs that will be also implemented and will be inclusive when it comes to groups with disabilities or any other vulnerable category of the society, especially since maybe also us in Western Balkans Youth Lab are paying special attention to inclusion of young Roma and young persons with disabilities. So now back to again a regional perspective. I'm happy that today we have with us Mr. Samit Sarenkapic, project manager from the United Nations Population Fund, and having in mind that somehow we met with all of you already for a couple of times, I'm sure that Samit will have a lot of regional initiatives to share with us, maybe starting even with regional competition with you that has been launched previously. So Samit, thank you for your time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eugene. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. It's a super gloomy Monday here in Sarajevo, so I hope it's more sunny wherever you are at this moment. Essentially, I come from UNFPA, and UNFPA has offices in 4 of the Western Balkans economies. We just started our new programmatic cycle from 2021 to 2025, which also coincided with the coronavirus and the pandemic. So it essentially forced us to rethink everything that we've been doing so far, both in terms of our strategic focus. So what we are trying to do in this 5-year cycle now is to bring a comprehensive focus on youth, peace, and security, with an in-depth focus on young women and girls as a driving force behind some of the most amazing changes happening in the region. So when we were rethinking everything that we were doing, we started investing more in e-learning systems and mobile apps as a way, honestly, as a way to cut costs, but also to improve focus on what we deliver. When we were going through our books for the previous years, we were spending sometimes upwards of $150,000 on trainings alone, but the money that we spend there went to hotel costs, transportation, and so on, not necessarily adding value to the participant or to the issue that we were trying to resolve. So we invested part of that money into e-learning platforms as a way to assess the willingness of participants to learn. Because, you know, this is a small digression, but whenever we in the Balkans organize a training and we target and we bring 100 participants, we always know that 2/3 of them are going to get lost along the way, or we're going to end up with only 1/3 of those who are really willing to work and are committed to the issue. So not to spend that much money on hotels, we built e-learning systems as a way to pre-screen those participants who really want to work with us or who want to develop themselves, and then further invest into them through in-person and live trainings. So that led to mobile apps. We developed mobile apps for the healthcare system, trying to streamline communication between the ministries and service providers in a way to expedite both the access to information and the quality of services rendered, especially to young people. Young people and modern technologies, obviously they go together, but there weren't that many contents that were developed specifically for youth. We also started rethinking the entire approach of how we generate ideas. So we introduced multiple labs as a way to crowdsource solutions that are to guide us. So we developed the Youth Peace Lab, the Girls Advanced Lab, and together with RICO, this regional Youth Peace Lab that covers all 6 Western Balkans countries. They're a way again to crowdsource ideas, to give young people a voice, and to show to the general public that obviously young people have a lot of ideas. They know how to formulate those ideas into concrete proposals, and they can act on those proposals. In that sense, these labs are an innovation from our side. I know labs are being used throughout the world, but for UNFPA in the region, they're an innovation. And we have had an amazing response from the youth. We've partnered with the Mosaic Foundation, who many of you I'm sure know, and we're using their ecosystem, Alonets.pro, as a way to access youth and their ideas. The only additional thing that I'm going to mention is our key stakeholders and cross-cutting teams. In terms of key stakeholders, we introduced religious communities in our overall strategic plan as a stakeholder that merits special attention from us, specifically because their reach is so big. They're so important in the local levels, and for the most part, they have been overlooked in similar peace building or youth-related initiatives so far. We have given them a space and we have given them a voice, and we built bridges with them in order to craft programs that we can both agree on. Sometimes it's a very, you have to compromise a lot, but it's always better to work on something together than to work disjointed and sometimes in separate in completely opposite directions. So religious communities feature prominently in our work at local levels in issues such as intergenerational cooperation and solidarity and youth co-management. We're also one of the agencies that has Youth Advisory Board as a co-management tool, allowing young people to influence where we invest our money and where we go with our programs. In the intergenerational part, there's always this friction between youth groups and older persons, especially after elections, because usually these groups vote in completely opposite ways. And that's primarily because they're not familiar with each other's lived experiences. We're trying to bridge that gap by creating opportunities for them to cooperate. We built this thing called Time Bank. It's an online platform to support youth exchange between younger and older persons where the unit of exchange is not money, but time. So we're using intergenerational solidarity to deepen the social and public dialogue over pressing community challenges, because we can't afford to lose a single group and the talents and resources that exist within those groups while trying to solve these challenges, given how immensely complex and difficult they are. And lastly, we're partnering with businesses on the regional level, trying to influence their corporate social responsibility policies to align more with our values in our target groups. So we have a regional partnership with Violetta. It's a huge company selling, household supplies. They're supporting Girls Advanced Lab, and they're supporting around 5,000 young girls who will be participating in youth projects in Serbia and Bosnia in the coming time. And I'm pretty sure that I've taken more time than I was allotted, and I deeply apologize, and I'm super happy to be here.
Thank you, Sami. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to hear how you are having all these very different topics that you are dealing with, but still on the same time very interlinked, and on which ways actually you approach young people when working with with all of these different let's say initiatives, but also on the ways on how you work with youth at the local level and dealing with these intergeneration issues that we are all aware of, and its importance to be dealt with. So since, as you said, we are a bit late, last but not least, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Damir Neziri, country representative at Westminster Foundation for Democracy. Damir, thank you for being with us, and please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ognian. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me well. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity and to send the regards from our regional director, Emil, who would have loved to be here, but unfortunately he had previous engagements. So I'll do kind of cover the whole region if I manage. Just before I start, 1 minute on like, what is Westminster Foundation for Democracy? Because most of your organizations kind of know each other, but for some we might be kind of a bit unknown. WFD is the biggest British political foundation, established in 1992 in order to kind of support new emerging developing democracies around the world. And the foundation started its operations in the Western Balkans in 2008, where actually we opened the first ever office outside of London in Skopje, so where I am at this moment. And at this moment, we are operating in 38 countries on all continents and in most Western Balkan countries. Although WFD started as a grant-giving organization, currently we are not a donor organization like most of your organizations. Our programs are implemented through our country offices in close partner cooperation with institutions and partner organizations, most of the time civil society. In the past 3 years, within the Western Balkans Democracy Initiative, so that's our program that is funded by the British government, youth has been one of our main focuses in the Western Balkan countries. And this has been the case since the data and evidence we gathered shows that young people are one of the most marginalized groups alongside women and persons with disabilities across the region. So in almost every country, this is the case. These are kind of the three most marginalized groups. That being said, I will kind of try to group the efforts that we've been doing in the different offices. One of the things that we are trying to do, and it was kind of mentioned before, is we're trying to generate data around key youth issues. This has been a big problem all around the region. It is really hard to have reliable, relevant, and up-to-date data about issues of young people. So we were focusing on gathering data and creating analysis that primarily informed our interventions, but also allowed us to kind of channelize the data to the institutions and to other partners of ours, to civil society, parliaments, even political parties. So some of this analysis included analysis of cost of youth migration. Some of you might have seen this. This is a very interesting research that was done across different countries, and that shows how much money the Western Balkans is losing by young people moving out. And it's counted in billions every year. So that's a very interesting thing. And based on that, a great cooperation with the government of Serbia was started, where with the office of the Prime Minister, our colleagues are working on something called return point of return, where like the government is trying to bring back these people through kind of a circular movement. Then we're also trying to see what are the social political attitudes of young people across the region. So what they think about institutions, outlook for the future, EU accession, and so on and so forth. And there we have a lot of interesting data for the different countries. And also we're looking at how young people are represented in elections, both on election lists and in institutions, but also in the party programs, because one of the key things that we need to have in order to have youth representation is to have young people in the programs and in the institutions. Another thing that we're focusing on is increasing trust in institutions. So all of the data from the region shows that young people are not engaged and involved with different institutions because most of them do not trust the institutions. So when I say institutions, I mean government institutions, I mean parliaments, political parties, but unfortunately, I also mean civil society organizations. So young people do not trust even civil society informations. And the reason is because they don't think that these institutions work or understand their needs and issues and do not work on behalf of the young people. So here we're trying to kind of work with different institutions to help them to be more youth focused and act like as a channels of the needs of young people and advocate for their needs. Like with parliaments, we work with youth caucuses or different committees that focus on young people, with political parties and political party youth wings to kind of include them in the political discourse, but also with local governments and institutions. And these are all our partners in the whole process. We also focus on youth mobilization, activism, and participation. Again, data from different countries in the region shows that young people are rarely involved and consulted. Like less than 1/5 of young people said that they're consulted. But it also shows that young people that are involved and consulted are much more happy with their position in society. And when they're more happy with their position in society, they're much less, there is a less probability that they will leave the region. So we are focusing on this, trying to kind of help them, teach them on how to get more involved and more included in order to feel more happy with their position and then maybe decide to stay. So this is kind of like an umbrella overview. But of course, because we have 5 offices now, we have offices. So although it's a regional project, the interventions are country specific or context specific and they're based on the data. So we have interventions that are in line with most of the issues that we spoke before. For example, our Bosnia office works and will work on youth unemployment and working with institutions to decrease the youth unemployment. Or as I mentioned, in Serbia, our office in Serbia is working on migration. So we are kind of covering different issues depending on the needs in the country based on ongoing and revolving data input. Thank you.
Damir, thank you very much. It was really nice to listen also from the Westminster Foundation perspective on how the youth issues are very important, and I fully agree with you when you say on how actually it is beneficial for our societies to have active youth and youth being involved in all processes, and that we all together should work also on building trust among each other so that we can really work together on all issues that matter to young people. So thank you very much. And with Damir, now we are concluding this official part of the panel, and I'm using this opportunity to invite you all to raise hands in case you have any question or comment towards our panelists, or in general you would like to have an intervention. And of course this refers to everyone attending the event, as now we are having the let's say on the same in the same time, on the same place, young people, policymakers, and representatives of donors. So as the floor is yours, please feel free to ask or add anything that you would like to contribute to the event itself. I see that we have a raised hand from Mr. Dobrushi, who was presenting actually the donor interventions before the panel itself. So maybe it would be also beneficial to hear about your respective overview of the situation. So Mr. Dobrushi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agni. I mean, it's after listening all the presentations from the colleagues, you know, and understanding better what's going on, you know, I have two comments. One, which is more on the easy part, you know, like listening all the work, you know, I'm surprised how youth has more problems in the region, you know, with all the work that donors do. Probably we should have solved all the issues of that youth is facing in the region, you know, but on the other hand, jokes aside, this demonstrates very much the need and how timing the whole event is, like, because we're seeing an array of activities, and investments from donors, unfortunately, without any price tag behind, like I mean, there were very few colleagues who mentioned, like, how much they're investing, focusing on youth, etc., which brings me to the same issue and problem we raised in the beginning at the mapping, that there is no, there was very difficult to collect data, especially on how much support, financial support donors give specifically to youth issues, given the fact that, it's either mainstreamed or integrated. So I think this is a very important topic. The other thing which kind of spurred in my mind, like basically hearing on what other colleagues mentioned, is the fact that how necessary it is to pick one or two issues at the regional level and make them basically approachable at the regional level and tackled at the regional level, because of course we cannot become the pill for all the panacea of problems that youth face, but given in the context of the COVID-19, etc., I think it's crucial and very important to identify one or two or three areas which are really very important for youth, and instead of being scattered in a multitude, of course, with full understanding of the donor specificities and priorities, it's very important to maybe to take a breath, and start thinking, like, how can we come up with one or two or three topics, which are basically really represent the most important issues. And I think listening to the colleagues in the first panel, and I think this panel also serves the need to, and makes it more acute, the need to, for the donors to have an ear on the needs of the youth, like, of course, there are, mechanisms that a few donors have included in their work, like youth groups, etc., advisory groups, but I think this has to become kind of an institutionalized, so the voice of youth comes more and is reflected more accurately, like in the work of the donors. So it makes the work of the donors not a one vector direction, but builds this synergy that is very much needed. And the last that I want to mention is like our economies, also youth needs stimulus, and I would urge the donors that to take this moment of reflection, including ourselves, like, to think how they can not decrease but increase the funding for youth, because I think in this moment it's 21% of the population, but it's the population which determines the future of the region, so I think it would be naive to think that limiting the investment and the support to youth would fix the issues in the region. I think it starts with youth, it starts with education of youth, and with the support that we provide to them. I think everything else becomes rhetoric, becomes language, usual language of donors. I think, and we should avoid the trap of the traditional language of donors. I think time is to infuse the youth energy also in the language of donors. So this is all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Dobrushi, thank you very much for your additional contribution, and also I want to thank to Samit for his contribution in chat. And of course, I have to say that I agree, but on the other side, I mean, that is the reason why we decided actually to go with this story of bringing youth together with policymakers to discuss all those issues that matter to young people. And this is just the, let's say, the first step towards broad coalition on youth. And in that light, I would like to say that on behalf of the whole team, I believe that we are really looking forward on making this informal donor coordination mechanism really as a way where donors will be able to listen to young people and reflect needs of young people while making the policies, but on the other side that we will be able to provide understanding of both policymakers and youth towards donors as well, having in mind their strategic, let's say, plans for the region. But of course, it should be encouraging for us that maybe already when we meet again in December, after day of tomorrow, that we will have something more to discuss and maybe in more details. But as Secretary General mentioned, we are aiming also to establish this online platform that will serve actually to have all these data that you mentioned. And in that sense, thank you very much. And also I'm happy to see that we have a raised hand from Ms. Janana Šćekić from UNDP, and having in mind regional achievements when it comes to youth agenda. Janana, with great pleasure, I give the floor to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry, I had some technical problems, but thank you, Ognjen, for inviting us to this to today's event. And I'm so sorry that UNDP, due to short notice, couldn't coordinate collecting of inputs. But you are all aware that we are working a lot in this field of empowering youth at national and local level. I would just mention for Montenegro that we are working a lot with youth, supporting Ministry of Education, especially administration of youth and sports in developing of strategic documents, then working in the field of employment of youth and many other topics. And we will definitely, together with you, share information, and it would be really, we would be delighted to share info useful for your platform. I think that it would be really useful to have all information at one place, and also for the donor side to be more informed of what is happening in the region, and it would be useful for directing our interventions more effectively. But in this regard, maybe it was also short notice for our regional manager of Reload Program second phase to join the meeting. So he asked me to present briefly just Reload second phase, and as it is really relevant for the youth policy in the region. Regional program for local democracy in the Western Balkans, second phase, have started with implementation as of January this year, and it will be implemented in all 6 countries and territories in the region, in the Western Balkan region, and it is in total worth of around 50 million euros. So it is really huge intervention funded by European Union. And I would like to share information that the third component is dedicated to youth. So we would be working with youth initiatives in the whole region, especially in the field of in the topics that were assessed and found as useful at the local level. So regional program would work with 80 or more municipalities in the region, and as you already mentioned, that youth policy must be strengthened at the urban level. You know, in smaller municipalities, we would be working in that field mostly. We would like to, you know, improve the communication between youth and local administrations, and organize a series of trainings and workshops for youth and local stakeholders, local administrations, in order to improve their communication and participation of youth in the policy making. And apart from that, we would finance some small initiatives, but in the third subcomponent of Reload program, we would give opportunity to youth organizations to apply for funds and to support their small initiatives at the local level in selected municipalities. Apart from that, we would work and offer some employment program opportunities for youth all over the region, starting from internship programs, then vocational trainings, first job experience, and similar activities. And that's it in brief about Reload second phase. We already had several meetings with you, and I encourage you to contact our regional program manager as well in order to better coordinate all the activities in our countries and maybe to improve our cooperation in collecting information for your activities and platform. Thank you again, and if anybody have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Janana, very much. I wish you a lot of success with Reload 2 following the success of the first phase, and we will make sure that on the following activities you can coordinate better so that we have also additional representatives of the UNDP, but still we are very grateful to have you today with us so as that we can listen to all the activities that you are aiming to implement with within the second phase. So even though we are already late and I should pass the floor to Bleriana, I wanted to ask maybe just one more time, do we have any questions or comments from our participants, from policymakers or youth or other representatives of donor community? If we have some raised hands. Yes, we have from Miss Jenny Sinakoli from EU delegation to Albania, if I'm not mistaken. So please, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. It has been really very interesting meeting. On behalf of the European Union, I'd like to confirm that youth, it is a priority for the European Union, and so is the Western Balkan. There are many initiatives, including this project, Western Balkan Youth Lab, but also other regional initiatives like RICO or several projects implemented by our partners at regional level. But what I wanted to say, it is youth, it is our priority, and it is a priority in every EU delegation as well. But first of all, it has to be a priority at national level. We as donors, especially the EU being the biggest donor in the region for youth, we have included youth in all our sectors, including employment, anti-corruption, public administration, and because it is such a cross-cutting sector, let's say, cross-cutting issue, but it has to be a priority not from the donor side, but from the national governments. Once more, I would like to confirm that we are here to support the national governments, both financially and politically, but they have to put youth on their agendas. Thank you.
Ms. Sinakoli, thank you very much for your intervention, and I will use this opportunity also to thank you for participation, and of course to thank once again to European Union for supporting Western Balkan Youth Lab and many other regional projects in the region, but also we can see that this continuous and support from European Union level, especially if we bear in mind economic and investment plan, different employment programs that have been launched during this summer, and especially in light of COVID-19. But again, also maybe Western Balkans agenda on innovation, research, youth and culture to be pretty soon on board, supporting young people from the region. And maybe with this intervention, if we don't have any additional comments or questions, as far as I see, we don't. I would like to invite our dear colleague Bleriana, who was actually working very hard on the mapping exercise and on the let's say developing this concept on informal donor coordination mechanism jointly with us from the project, and would like to hear from her side how can we see these overlaps and spaces for synergies following the interventions from representatives of donors. But of course, before that, needs reflecting youth position in the region by youth and policymakers. Bleriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ogi, for the excellent moderation of this session and also for the nice presentation. Thank you also to Mr. Dobrushi for presenting our donor mapping findings. As I mentioned before, this has been a joint effort, so thank you also to the RCC for bearing with us and the entire team until we finalized the reports. It is really reassuring to hear that important issues that we raise in the reports are also mentioned in the session today, starting from the relevance of resilience building on issues related to the impact of COVID-19, but also climate change, digital transformation, issues of disinformation and developing literacy, but also issues of inequalities, discrimination and inclusion of young people and all other subgroups within the youth communities. And also we cannot stress enough the importance of having this coordination mechanism as structured as possible, so as to be able to better address the needs emphasized by the youth. Also, they were emphasized also in the first panel this morning. And of course, we are grateful to all the donors for their responsiveness during our field work, but also for today's input and for detailing their area of work, focusing on youth. It is not an easy task to draw conclusions about overlaps and synergies based on these inputs that we received today, because they were all very valuable information, a lot of information to process that actually feeds into the work that we are doing and into the work that RCC is doing for this coordination mechanism. And we are happy to see that they echo the findings of the mapping and that the aim of the informal mechanism is relevant to the donors in the region, but also to policymakers and to youth representatives as well. I will try to do my best, but in case I miss anything, of course, Ogni or Ivana can intervene. And of course, we've been taking notes, and we will make sure to come back for anything that I might miss during this brief presentation. So again, it is very reassuring, and I say this not only as a researcher, but also as a representative of young people as well, to see an increased interest from the side of the donor on youth agenda, but also on this proposed mechanism for coordination of youth agenda at the regional level. And I'd like to echo the point that Mrs. Sinakole from the EU delegation made, that this coordination and this priority given to youth on the side of the donor is one thing, but it is also very important for the governments to prioritize youth, as we have mentioned also in the first panel. As you pointed out, coordination remains an issue, and this is the right moment to join forces for regular dialogue and partnership to make this coordination mechanism function, but also not simply as donors talking to each other, but as a broad coalition on youth, as presented by the RCC team earlier on, so as we can hear directly the voices of youth, their needs, their perspectives, but also communicate with all relevant stakeholders in the youth agenda. And we trust that this meeting is only the beginning for this broad coalition of youth that will be further strengthened in the future with the cooperation of all the stakeholders. It is also interesting, and it is very reassuring to listen from donors and see that youth, although not a specific program for all of them, is still a cross-cutting issue, or youth are principal target groups for donors, and that they are working in areas that are of priority and are confirmed as such by youth themselves as well, such as employment, education, civic inclusion, social inclusion, and so on. And it is important that donors are working now on long-term confirm programming with attempts for better coordination, but also with for consultation with target groups, with youth in this occasion or other civil society organization. And sustainability of interventions is a concern. Some of the inputs today as well highlighted the issue of sustainability, but also as an area of opportunity where we can all work more to ensure the sustainability of intervention with bigger outreach and impact for improving the life of young people and for making them see their future in the Western Balkans. Also, it is welcoming to see that some donors are setting up youth advisory structure or other mechanisms to inform their programming and their intervention, and transforming the process of programming with directly involving youth is something very positive and something that should most probably be mainstreamed and taken on board by other development partners and donors as well. We see that key priorities still, there are some overlaps in the sense because quite a few donors are working on them, such as the issue of employability, the links of education to the labor market, entrepreneurship, and vocational education and training. And this is all very good because these are priority areas as were mentioned also by the policy representatives in the first panel, but also social inclusion and protection, civic participation and reconciliation and regional cooperation are gaining more ground. We see that there is no essential area, how to say, of relevance to youth that is entirely out of the focus of the donors. It is good to see new programs that focus on priority areas such as youth and businesses that were mentioned here today, but also increased focus on digital transformation and green agenda and the role of youth in this dual agenda of the European Union, but also of the SDGs. Exchange of young people within the Western Balkans, but also beyond the borders of the Western Balkans with the EU and with US and other territories. Also focusing is interesting that some donors are focusing on youth and sports because this has come up as an interesting and emerging area from our mapping. And of course, rural youth that was mentioned also by the policymaker is an emerging priority area that needs to receive even more attention. Youth labs for crowdsourcing and generating ideas that were mentioned here today sound very innovative and very good ideas that could be then mainstreamed and used also on other occasions. Also, the launch of the Regional Challenge Fund that is focusing on vet and business sector is a positive note, or the Regional School Exchange Scheme. These are examples that point to the possibility of how donors could work together, but also in strong cooperation with other stakeholders to push further the agenda of youth and to address the needs of youth. In conclusion, the priority areas seem to remain the same. So youth employability, particularly in terms of returnee youth, refugee youth, marginalized youth, and the need group. Education and mobility, also considering digital and virtual mobility because of the COVID-19 induced reality. Entrepreneurship and income generation through VET, but also through innovation and startup development. Civic and political engagement of youth and participation in decision making. Social inclusion, empowerment, social protection of youth, and including here various groups, marginalized groups from the youth communities, and intercultural dialogue, interethnic relation, reconciliation, and peace building. And then we have some emerging priority areas, as were mentioned also before, such as youth migration and brain circulation, and some donors are already working on this. Youth and innovation, so the startup, the digital skills agenda, also in light of the COVID-19 reality. Youth and sustainable development and environment, so the green agenda that was mentioned earlier. Another important area and emerging area, of course, is youth and security issues in terms of not only religious extremism, radicalization, but also in terms of political extremism, radicalization, and organized crime, youth activism, and youth access to social and health care services. We would like to suggest additional areas where we find that there is almost no funding or very little funding, but interest is increasing, such as the literacy programs that do a combination between media, science, data, and digital literacy, youth and science, youth and sports, as we mentioned. Also looking into youth and diaspora with the aim of the brain circulation and tackling brain drain and migration. We strongly suggest youth cooperation within the Western Balkan 6 economies, but also beyond the Western Balkan 6. And of course, engagement of youth in building resilient societies and focusing on the challenges and opportunities that are provided by the digital transformation and the climate change for our societies, which affect not only Western Balkan 6, but I would suppose the entire contemporary society. I will leave it here, and as I said, we will take this further on also tomorrow morning with the parallel sessions that we have, and I'm really hopeful that this mechanism will bring about concrete benefits and impact for the youth agenda at the regional level. Thank you.
Thank you, Blariana, a lot. Thank you for this presentation. And as we could follow you while speaking, this is exactly what we are going to do tomorrow, and actually to split ourselves in these 3 groups so that we can really contribute to all of those topics that you mentioned. And I am personally very happy to see that everyone from the very beginning of the event is still with us, showing the interest in this way of cooperation and establishing this way of cooperation and sharing information among each other. And on the other side, having youth as a cross-cutting issue is something very important, but I believe that it would be really beneficial for the region as well to have youth as a group per se that receives additional support from all active donors, but most importantly, as per their needs. So somehow we came almost to the end of the event, and it is a great pleasure of mine to invite Miss Maja Handžiska-Trendafilova, head of RCC's program department, to provide us with concluding remarks. And Maja, thank you very much for being with us the whole day. I'm giving the floor to you.
Sure. Thank you, Ogi, a lot. I'll try to be rather brief after today's rather engaging discussions. So I would like to use the opportunity to thank you all, of course, once more time for your readiness to join forces and be part of the broad coalition for youth. And I'm happy that we see the initial steps of the informal donor coordination mechanism that RCC's Youth Lab project establishes in close cooperation with DigiNear, but all of us here. And having all of us here on board, I am sure that this initiative will be further advanced, nurtured, and developed in the period to come. So I do hope that you can agree with me that today we had great opportunity to learn more on the most acute needs, but also the longer term needs in the region, as well as the ongoing international support and current state of play when it comes to the Western Balkans youth. And actually, as we discussed as part of the series of consultations that were preceding today's event, we want to make sure that the process is as useful and as effective as it can be. And therefore, we really hope that the discussions that we initiated today here jointly will continue tomorrow with even more practical aspects in terms of the 3 different working groups for which our participants registered. So having said this, it is our expectations and hope that tomorrow we hear from all of us present, youth, policymakers, donors, on what and how we should focus in regard to active youth participation in decision-making processes, but also the other topics relevant to our youth, which we initiated today. So summarizing today's rather rich discussions, we really do see the possibilities for further joining forces, further exchanges, and sharing of both information and experiences. So as we announced at the beginning of this day, we will make sure that the online platform is available and functional till our next meeting. But here I must call for everyone's engagement, because we will need to have the support and input so we can make the data on all of the ongoing or forthcoming projects available to the public in a user-friendly and accessible way. So before we close today, please let me use this opportunity to once again reiterate that we in the Regional Cooperation Council stand ready and willing to support this process as much as possible. Of course, fully relying on the close cooperation with all of you here. We can only do it together in a collaborative way. So with this in mind, I'm wishing all of us here a nice and calm remainings of the day, and actually looking forward to seeing and welcoming you all tomorrow in the same number as we were today, to continue our more practical discussions on the priorities and merging the needs and priorities ahead. Thank you very much, Ogi.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much for these encouraging messages and for your continued support to the project and all our efforts. And on the same time, I would like to thank to all participants and panelists and everyone who contributed to today's discussion. And I really hope that now we have a kind of fruitful ground for expanding these discussions tomorrow in these 3 separate groups. And I would like to use this opportunity as well to invite you to join us tomorrow as well, and hope that somehow we will have this path towards broad coalition on youth ready by tomorrow, and that jointly we will be able to go and expand all the joint efforts that we might came up with. So thank you once again, and see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Have a nice afternoon.
Tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.